Welcome and thank you for joining us virtually for our very first All Grantee workshop. I can't tell you how exciting it is to see your faces, knowing all of the work you put in to get here, all the conversations we've had and the planning we've done to prepare for what is going to come next. You know, as someone who's worked in this space for more than 15 years, it's still remarkable to me to reflect on where we are in this moment. We're sitting on the precipice of a once-in-a-generation investment in broadband connectivity and programming that's going to change the face of this country, and in particular, our Appalachian region forever. Over the next several months, we will be working together to prepare your communities for this critical investment. And while there's so much that we don't know, the specifics of state application guidelines, changes in the policy landscape that are still to come, who's going to be awarded for BEAD grants and who unfortunately won't. But what we do know is that each of you with us today is a leader in the connected future of your communities. You are leading your regions as new opportunities arise in your local economies. You are leading your regions, your counties, your cities, townships through the coming years as the landscape changes. As the needs of your residents change in response, really, when it comes down to it, you are the critical infrastructure that this program, the Appalachia Digital Accelerator program, is invested in. So looking over where we are, as of today, we're going to be working with 22 grantee organizations across Appalachia to create 50 community connectivity plans. And those plans are going to represent 68 unique communities. And we're going to add a few more as we go. We're not really quite there done. Next slide. By the end of this year, you're all going to complete an initial review of your community's existing planning efforts, right? All of the pieces, parts that you've already done in the last few months, several months or year. You're going to give thought to your goals and vision for a connected future and consider how your community might grow and align to state priorities. After the holidays, we're going to be off to the races, working towards grant deadlines that have been identified to best suit your community's connectivity needs and eligibility. But over the course of this program, I've occasionally been asked, why work with communities? Why not ISPs? And while there's so many answers to this question, the short of it is we're not building the field of dreams. We're building the tools with which all of you will create tomorrow's connected economy. Deciding on where to place the shovel or what poles to hang the fiber on is the easy part, if any of it really can be considered easy. What takes real, persistent, and continuous work is how we imagine to use these tools, how we get them into the right hands, how we partner together to use them to provide better opportunities, better services, and better lives for ourselves and future generations. So what we are building together through this program is not just the plans for a future network infrastructure. We're building relationships, new communication channels, new knowledge of what it means to plan for connectivity, but also knowledge of one another. We're not alone in this journey. And that opportunity doesn't need to stop at the county line. And that's why partnership is so central and so critical to this program. So with that, let me take a moment to introduce the Connect Humanity team. Team, raise your hand in Zoom, and that kind of will help everyone highlight themselves if you can. Most of you have already had the pleasure of meeting some or most of our small but mighty project team. But for those who haven't, I want to just call out Sarah Brown Campello. She's our community manager. She's going to be the one to send out resources, calendar invites, monitor your technical assistance requests, and overall make sure you are informed on any program updates and that your needs for support are being met. Ryan Wanstreet is our assistant program manager. Most of you have spent a fair amount of time with Ryan preparing your subaward contracts. Ryan is in charge of general operations on the program and is your resource for questions about grant requirements and reporting. Finally, we are fortunate to have 3 wonderful American Connection Corps members with us. That's Mark Mangino, Shantiera Hills, and Caitlin Hintz. But we also have the support of a broader Connect Humanity team as well. And so let me just call them out and tell you a little bit about the organization. Connect Humanity is a nationally focused 501c3 organization, and we combine impact investments, philanthropic programs, and technical guidance to support underserved communities across the U.S. with the capital and the knowledge they need to get connected to broadband and thrive in a digital society. Through the course of this program, it's likely you're going to get to know our other additional members of our Connect Humanity team. Particularly, you might hear from Callum Cameron, who's our communications manager, Brian Vo, our chief investment officer, Jordana Barton, who's one of our senior fellows, and very likely others as well. But on the Digital Accelerator program, we are really far from being alone. This isn't all about Connect Humanity. And before I introduce all of our amazing partners, which I'm excited to get to, we want to do a little poll just to have a little bit of fun. And so we're going to ask you, what area of your plan do you expect to need the most support on? And Sarah,
I'm going to launch this poll. Everyone give me a moment. Stop my screen share. All right, poll is launched.
All right, and these are basically our 3 sections of the plan. Most all of you have talked about this. You know that these are the sections, and I'm really interested to see what you all think.
I'll close the poll in about 10 seconds.
All right, get your questions in there, or your responses to these questions in.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and publish, Sam.
All right, go right ahead.
And
Can
folks see
that? Looks to me like the broadband infrastructure question is rising to the top, but really we have a great spread. And it's going to be interesting because I'm going to make a little note of this because I want to see if we still respond the same way about 6 to 8 months from now, right? See where we are. That was just a little bit of fun to see where we are. And, you know, as I just get ready to introduce our other partners who will be helping you navigate these sections of your plan. First, we are extremely fortunate to be working with our lead community agencies, or we like to call them the LCAs for short. These organizations are regional partners whose role it is to provide on-the-ground support to communities through the planning process. These organizations are bringing critical local knowledge and stakeholder networks to the table to ensure that our communities know how to navigate this planning process. And within the context of the local landscape and ecosystem, right? There's not enough to just know what the planning process is. We also need to know what it means to do it in our local ecosystems. So while many of them are going to be providing project management assistance and direct guidance on various aspects of the planning process, if and likely when additional support is needed, they're able to request assistance from, drum roll please, our technical assistance advisors. So these are our technical assistance team. It is growing. We have more to add, but they are nationally recognized technical assistance experts with a really wide array of expertise, experience, and skills to ensure no section of this planning process is out of reach for any of you. Between the Connect Humanity team, our lead community agencies, and our fabulous technical assistance experts, we're here to assure you confidently that you can do this. Every community is going to end this program with a plan that reflects their community's needs, their priorities, and their plans for the future. But we're not the only ones that believe so strongly in this project and in all of you. We are joined by our funders. And so I just want to take a quick moment to thank the Appalachian Regional Commission for their significant investment and support of this project and their investment in all of you. Also, a little word of thanks to the Truist Foundation and the Duke Energy Foundation for their additional community and matching support of this program that is really critical to making this project possible. So with that, I am done talking for a moment. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to give you a little bit of an overview of the program. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sam. Hey, everyone. My name is Sarah Brown Campello, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at Connect Humanity. I will be helping you with anything that you might need, but especially around supporting the admin and getting the training and support you might need to finish your connectivity plans. Today, I want to highlight 3 important parts of the program. As you know, one of the main deliverables for this program is a complete community connectivity plan. Each of you will end this program with a plan in hand that addresses 3 things. 1, your community's digital equity needs. 2, your broadband infrastructure needs. And then 3, a financial plan on how to resource for those things that you outlined. To get started on this process, Connect Humanity and our technical assistance providers have developed a connectivity plan checklist. And I'm going to go ahead and share that with you now on the screen. This might look familiar. We've shared a version of this in the past with most of you. The connectivity plan checklist is divided into 4 different sections. I'm really zoomed out right now, but I will zoom in a moment just to show you the 4 different sections. This first one in blue is preliminary research and readiness. The second part in green is around digital equity. The third part in yellow is around broadband infrastructure. And the fourth part is in pink is the financial plan. The idea is that each of these lines is outlining something or a necessary asset that will be going into your plan. I'm going to go in and zoom in here. Where relevant and possible, we've included descriptions and instructions and helpful links if you scroll to the right on your plans. So we have some descriptions for the higher level tasks, then instructions and helpful links. These connectivity checklists are grouped by LCA, so please take care to work in the tab with your community's name. So each of the LCAs will have one connectivity plan checklist, and then at the bottom, you can find your community here. So right now I'm in Ashtabula's, but there's also Mahoning and Trumbull in the same spreadsheet. If you don't have a Google account, you should still be able to work on Google Drive as a guest. You can let me know if you have any issues with this, and I will be sharing the links with permissions with everyone after this workshop. 2 critical things to note here on the checklist is going back over to the left. You'll see column D, LCA status, and column E, community status. As you go through each of these lines and each of these sections, we ask you to please update where you are in gathering that information. Maybe you're not started, maybe it's in progress, maybe needs assistance, maybe it's complete. And the idea is that your LCA will go in and validate and work through this list with you. So I'm going to give each of your communities access to a Google folder, and it's going to look something like this. In this Grantee community folder, you will have your checklist, which is here, and then you'll have 7 other folders. The first 4 of these folders align to the checklist. So for instance, if you're in the checklist and you're collecting some demographic information, maybe under the preliminary research and readiness, once you collect all of these demographics, you will then go here to your Grantee community folder, find the preliminary research and readiness folder, and you will leave the data in here. And then so on as you go throughout your whole checklist. We've also left a few other things in here. We have a folder for photos and videos. If you take any during the course of your work, during the course of this project, and you have the permissions from the folks that you're taking photos of, we encourage you to please upload them here, or you can email them to me and I can upload them for you. We also have a reporting and compliance folder. And then we also have a connectivity plan folder. And this is where we will be putting a template for your connectivity plan later. It should be ready by the end of the year. So I mentioned to each of you that you'll each be getting your own community folder. And I also want to mention that we'll be sharing a public resources folder with you all. This will have all the recordings from our different trainings, our different workshops, any assets that our TAs create for folks. I'll be putting them in here. I can also be emailing everyone to update you that there's new assets in the folders. Just showing this to you quickly, because here, for instance, we make everything public, so you can see all the workshop presentations here. All right, so now moving back to the PowerPoint slide. Oops. So there's a lot in these checklists. Some of you may already have these assets or some of these assets, and some of you might be starting from scratch. We anticipate that you will need support throughout the program, as Sam mentioned. When in doubt, your LCA is a great partner to take to get some first support from. Aside from your LCA, there are 3 buckets of support available through this program. First, we'll be hosting bi-monthly open houses on Tuesdays. This is an hour of time where select technical assistance providers and Connect Humanity will be hanging out in a breakout room for 1 hour, ready and available to help you solve any problems or to help you problem shoot. I will be sending all of the grantee communities a calendar invite to hold this time. You're not required to come to these open houses. They are designed for extra support if you need. I do suggest, though, that when you get that calendar invite from me, you do accept it so that you have them on an ongoing basis and you don't lose the calendar invite. If you do lose the calendar invite, just let me know and I can resend it to you. The second bucket of support through this program will be planning webinars and larger trainings throughout the program. We'll also try to schedule these on Tuesdays, and these trainings are open to everyone and will have to do with some element of your connectivity plan. You're always welcome to reach out to us if you have any ideas for trainings that we should offer. I'll also be sending calendar invite holds for those trainings. They're optional, but encouraged. And then also we will be recording those trainings and they will be in the public resources folder. The third bucket of training is individual one-on-one or cohort support. We might identify that you and maybe members of your cohort in a similar place in your planning need a specific training in a specific area as relates to your connectivity plan. These trainings would be mandatory and we'll do our best to schedule times that work for everyone. And that's all I have for now. So please be on the lookout for a few important communications from me. I'll be sending you various calendar invites and also sharing your Google Drive links and connectivity plan checklists. Remember, if you have any questions whatsoever, please email me. You can put them in the chat box or come to our open house on Tuesdays. And with that, I will pass it off to my lovely colleague, Brian.
Thank you so much. As Sam mentioned, I am your resource for questions on grant requirements and also reporting. I'm also the person you can come to if you have any questions about invoicing. So just a really quick overview of those 3 things. On reporting, your grantee reporting cadence is indicated in your grant agreement. Now we gave you an overview of what those reports will look like in your grant documents, although we do anticipate they will evolve slightly. Most can anticipate that your first official reports will be due in the beginning of December, although a few of you do have a modified schedule. So please do check your reporting or your grant documents. These reports will be an amalgamation of narrative, budgets, and match reports. And of course, at the end of your grant period, you'll need to submit your final connectivity plan. Now, on compliance, as a federal grant, all of our subgrantees must follow all federal guidelines. The grant manual has a link to an FAQ about how you can stay compliant as a grantee organization. It goes over things like how to maintain documentation, how to undergo procurement, how to keep track of personnel time, and much more. We highly encourage all of you to read this document and to become familiar with it. As questions come up, we'll add to it over the course of the grant period. And now last but not least, invoicing. Most of you will invoice twice over the course of this grant period, although some of you do have a slightly different cadence. Again, please check your grant agreement. You can submit your first invoice now for your initial fund distribution. We'll send a follow-up email on this point, but all info can also be found in your grantee manual. In general, I am 100% here to support you with any questions that you might have about the operations of this program, and I'm available to you whenever you have any questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out at any time if you are at all confused or would like to chat through something. So I'd be more than happy to help at any time. And with that, I'll turn it back to Sam.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ryan. Who's ready for another poll, right? Before we dive into all of our introductions, I want to give us a minute to ask something else. What are the outcomes of this program that you're most excited about? We gave a couple of prompts. There's probably other things we're not capturing, but let's just think about this for just a moment. And now I'm going, when we go through our community introductions, I'm going to be calling on some of you to extrapolate a little bit on your thoughts on this question. So just a little forewarning there.
I'll give 10 more seconds.
All right, it seems like a bunch of are still coming in. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Great, ending the poll.
All right. Can we all see the results?
You might have to read them out for folks, Sam, if they're not a...
Okay. Most of us are excited about our finalized connectivity plans. Understandably, that is the key deliverable of this program and the thing we're going to spend most of our time focused on delivering for each other. But I really am enjoying seeing some of the other responses. Opportunities for funding, we're definitely going to be looking at that across your geographies, ideas for new programs. I think you're going to come up with some really interesting ideas when it's particularly around the digital equity section of our planning. And the one that I think warms my heart the most is those of you who responded with new partnerships and relationships. I know that's what I'm most excited about. So thanks for indulging. It's great to get to know some of you and what you're thinking of. Again, I look forward to asking this again later. So, all right. In light of time, I'm going to go state by state, right? We have a lot of our grantees here with us. We do have a couple people that were not able to make it today, so I don't want to call anyone out in particular. But I'm going to go through when your state is called. I would love if you could use the raise hand feature that kind of will highlight you and your video for all of the rest of us so that we can kind of see who is from each of the states that we are covering today. And then I'll call on a couple of you to come on camera and tell us who you are, what organization you're from, and what community you're representing, and then a little bit more about how you responded to that poll, about what you are most looking forward to. All right, sound like a plan? All right, we're going to start out with Georgia. Now, unfortunately, I did say that we are, oh, do we have someone from Georgia? I do not think so. We're going to start with Georgia. Unfortunately, I think we are missing our Georgia grantee on the call today. If I'm wrong, just shout out, come off of mute. Looking through the faces. All right. Our Georgia group is going to be led by RISI. It's Rural Innovations Strategy. We are working with the town of Cohutta, who's located in the county of Whitfield. Very excited to work with them. Moving on. Kentucky. I know we have a couple of our Kentucky grantees here with us today. They are going to be working with our partner, SOAR. And so I'm going to let's call on you, Carrie. Carrie, tell us a little bit who you are, what organization you're with, and what you're looking forward to.
Sure, it's really good to be here today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, great. So we're with Redbird Mission in Southeast Kentucky in the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains here, down in the southeast corner. Redbird Mission has been here for over 100 years. We are serving some of the more remote areas of 3 different counties and beyond. So we're really struggling right now with making sure that our families and our neighbors up these hollers are going to be able to get the same type of broadband that you could get anywhere else in the state.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're so excited to be working with Redbird. There is so much opportunity there, and we really look forward to working with you on that connectivity plan. Thanks so much for sharing with us, Carrie. So now I'm going to go to our next state.
Hey, Sam, we have a hand raised from Christy Dodge.
Oh, yep. Christy, do you want to come on and introduce yourself?
Sure. Christy Dodge with Buffalo Trace Area Development District. And so in this grant, we're going to help serve 2 counties within our 5-county region, which is Lewis County and Robertson County. So we're located, as you can see on the map, in the northeast part of Kentucky along the Ohio River. So.
Okay, thank you. That's awesome. Another great organization we're really looking forward to working with through this program. Do I see another hand raised from Kentucky?
That was me. I'm with Christy with Buffalo Trace. I couldn't get my button to work.
Fabulous. Well, Jameson, you want to introduce yourself? We haven't met you yet.
I'm Jameson French. I work with the Buffalo Trace Area Development District. I'm a community development specialist. I work with Christy's department.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next one. New York. Do we have anyone from New York? Jen, are you on here with us? Shane, you are here. Come off mute and talk to us.
So I am a member of Southern Tier 8. I'm also the Regional Broadband Collaborative Chairman for them, but I'm also the Director of Planning for Shenango County. So I think what we're most excited about this project is really developing a plan. We have a number of programs and builds in place or starting, and we just want to actually have a plan rather than just kind of hopping around different areas and kind of going willy-nilly, I guess.
Excellent. That's a great goal to have. Jen, I see you're on the call. I did find you. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sorry, I had trouble using those buttons. Yep, I'm Jen Gregory. I'm the director for the northernmost local development district in the ARC region, and Shane Butler and Tammy Harris from Otsego County are here. They are the northernmost county. So I think Shane explained our plan perfectly. Thank you for having us.
Excellent. Thanks so much. We're excited to work in New York, and I know you guys have a really cool event that's coming up next month. I don't know if you want to share a little bit in case anyone else cares to clue in on that.
Oh, thank you, Samantha. What a commercial. So if you if today is enough broadband for you, you're welcome to join us November 15th in Binghamton. We have a conference to discuss broadband, showcase some models on middle mile development, showcase why it's important in the electric grid, and also discuss the digital equity plan, what New York State is doing, as well as how this supports economic development globally across the ARC region. I'll put the link to that in the chat. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jen. That's excellent. All right, next state, please. North Carolina. Excellent. See, who is here from North Carolina? Hands up. Michelle, I see you. You want to come off mute and talk to us a little bit? Tell us who you are. Where are you from?
I am Michelle Shiplett. I am the Executive Director for Graham Revitalization Economic Action Team, better known as the GREAT organization. We are located in the southwesternmost part of North Carolina in Graham County, just below the Smokies. So I'm really excited. We're going to try and work with our businesses in our area. That's kind of what we're going to focus on with our plan. We have a lot going on throughout the county and have been for decades, trying to get that last mile stuff in place. And we just decided we would really like to be able to have a plan that would be able to come to fruition more quickly, so that our community is not so discouraged in the waiting process. So that's kind of going to be what we're going to highlight as we go through this process.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michelle. Tiffany, you want to chime in here?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey, Tiffany.
Hi, I'm Tiffany, Jackson County Economic Development, and I'm excited about the plan. And I think for me, being in economic development, it's broadband is the one thing that has kind of been put on my plate. And there's so many different opportunities that are coming around and prioritizing that. So this plan is going to be really critical. And part of that for me is the digital navigator component, and how we engage deep into the communities to make sure that they have what they need.
That's a great call out. I don't know if any of you are unfamiliar with digital navigators, but if you aren't, you will absolutely be getting familiar through our broadband and digital equity programming pieces. In fact, you might hear about it a little bit later on this call. Thanks so much, Tiffany. Anyone else from North Carolina want to raise their hand, say hello? All right. Moving on to our next state then. Ohio. Ohio, we have a lot of good grantees in Ohio. I'm looking forward to seeing who we have here. JP, you want to come off mute?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for allowing us to be a part of this group. And so a little bit about me, or I guess about Ashtabula County. I'm one of the Ashtabula County Commissioners, and quickly recognized when I stepped into that position 7 years ago how important broadband was and how much it was lacking in a lot of our rural parts of the county. We are right on the shores of Lake Erie, just and border Pennsylvania. So we're in the northeast corner of Ohio, and we're the largest county in the state of Ohio area-wise. We have about 700 square miles and 27 townships in our county. And but we only have about 97,000 people. So we were recently notified that we were a recipient of an ARC Power Grant. So super excited about getting that in motion. That's going to connect about 3,000 addresses with fiber. So it's going to be a big shot in the arm, helping out about 14 townships. I think one of my big concerns is that as some of these projects do come to fruition, it's making sure that we can find the funding and the right grants or the right resources to help get to the places that still are going to be lacking. Because as places get connected and the providers are the last to reach out to the areas that are maybe the least populous or whatever, I have a lot of concern about being competitive in grant applications and getting funding that I know we won't be able as a county to provide, strictly ourselves, but finding the funding to do these very small little projects, probably in areas that providers on their own are just not going to invest in. And I don't want to leave anyone in our county behind. We have a lot of land. We're kind of in the heart of Ohio's wine country. And we have spacious land, affordable cost of living, great quality of life, but in many areas don't have internet. So we're not able to be competitive for attracting people that might want to move out here, or businesses in some of these rural areas of the county. So I'm very excited about getting a plan that will put on paper what sort of, I believe in my mind, is a good plan for the county, but we really don't have it in a hard copy form that we can use for, some of these, opportunities that are out there. And then, also getting a chance to help better understand where we can identify the best funding opportunities for our kind of situations, which may be, different than other types of communities.
That is great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, JP. I'm noticing that your colleague, Katie, is on. I think I saw her. Katie, you want to jump on and just say hello?
Hi, yes. Just to kind of mirror JP's sentiments, we're all very excited to work on bringing broadband and connectivity to the residents of Ashtabula County. This has been a passion project of JP's, and his excitement for this project has definitely spilled over to everybody who's helping work on this project. So there's a lot of excitement, a lot of hard work going into this, and we're all very excited.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie.
Let me acknowledge also, he's not, I don't think, on the call because of our group, but when I scrolled through, I saw Bill Callahan, and he's from our community, and he has been a tremendous resource. So Bill, thank you for being here and for all that you do to help me and Katie and the rest of us who are far less knowledgeable about this type of technology than you are. So you've been a great resource, and thanks for being a part of everything you do with us.
Bill is also one of our fabulous technical assistance advisors that will be working directly with our grantees through this program. So if you're here, thank you so much, Bill. I want to call on Rob. Rob, go ahead. Tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Grant. I'm with the Washington County Board of Commissioners, and we're on the opposite side of the state as our colleagues that were just on a second ago. We're bordering the Ohio River, and we're a rather rural county, which is a lot of us are, but we're the fifth largest county in terms of land area in the state, with a population of 60,000. And the thing that we're looking forward to is not only having a good plan for attracting funding, but also trying to meld together the different technologies that are needed to make all this work, knowing that there's no way that every household in this county is going to get fiber. It's just not feasible. And so how do we navigate that process and deliver the best product to our citizens?
Excellent. Thanks so much. I'm going to move over to Nick Coggins.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Coggins. I'm with the Trumbull County Commissioners. I'm the Director of Economic Development for Trumbull County. We're actually JP Ducrow's neighbor to the south. We're in a very unique situation where the southern portion of our county is very urban and developed, and was developed during the steel mill era, industrial revolution. And the northern portion of our township or our county is very rural. And it's one of the largest agricultural producers in the state of Ohio. So we have two different faces that we're wearing, and we have two different problems I think we're facing, but this plan should address both. One is the digital equity. I think for the southern portion of our county, it has an equity issue, and then the northern portion has an infrastructure issue. So this should hopefully address both, and we're excited. And I know our neighbors to the north are here with JP and Ashtabula, and our neighbors to the south are here with Mahoning. And I believe, is Anna on here maybe? Oh, yep, Anna's on here. So we're excited to get this going and get it done. And so we have 3 counties in a row, so we should be able to work collaboratively as a region, just like we did with the feasibility study several years ago now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick. And before I go to Anne Marie, I want to say we have some of our great LCAs on the call. I am skipping over you in the interest of time, but I really like you waving your hand, raising your hand, and Eastgate. Mark, I see you. Thanks for joining us today. Anne Marie.
Hi, my name is Anne Marie, but I'm known as Anna. And I'm just looking forward to this opportunity to continue with the progress that Mahoning County, Ashtabula, and Trumbull have been able to attain through Eastgate, who is our LCA. We've been putting in a lot of time and energy, I would say, for like the past 2 or 3 years. We were given an opportunity, unexpected by many of us, through the American Rescue Plan Act, to facilitate some actual, like some good projects in more highly populated areas to reach the schools and the rural areas through our county. So we're excited about that, but there's always room for growth. And again, it's a lot of money out there right now, and that would be, of course, we have a good map. A better map is always better. But financing, again, I would echo JP that it is, for me personally, it's our biggest concern, because to get the major companies out into those rural areas that are lacking is a very expensive, costly endeavor. So we just hope that this plan that we're working on with you guys helps us to advance that opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anne. And I'm personally excited to be working there because my husband and my family is from the Mahoning County. So I'll have a lot of people to answer to if we don't get a successful plan over there. So thanks for being here. Did we get everyone from Ohio? All of our grantees from Ohio? All right, let's move on to what is our next state. Yay, awesome. It's another one. We have a lot of great grantees in Pennsylvania. Please raise your hand, or if you still have a hand raised from a previous state, do lower that. Let's see, who do we have? I'm going to call on Jennifer first. Jennifer, tell us about you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Wakeman. I'm the Executive Director of Drive, and we are a 5-county economic development entity. We are situated in central Pennsylvania, so north of Harrisburg and a little bit east of State College. And we actually have already done some significant deployment of a wireless network that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But it was done very quickly because it was CARES Act funded. So we thought maybe we should actually do a plan before we try to do this again. So that's why we're here. That's what we're looking forward to actually accomplishing and figuring out, what's left to do, what remains, because there's always more to do.
We are so happy to have you here. Thanks so much, Jennifer.
You bet.
Go over to Gregory.
Samantha, I'm a little under the weather. Would you mind speaking for me? I just sent you something in chat.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
But thanks
Thank you.
for waving.
Yep.
Apologies. Troy.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. So Troy Prutzman here on behalf of Briar Creek Township Supervisors. We reside in Briar Creek Township, Columbia County, PA. We sort of sit a little bit to the north of the East Branch of the Susquehanna, and we back up to the Jonestown Mountains. So community-based wise, we're pretty rural. We sit on the outskirts of some larger municipalities as well as community base around us. But sort of our aesthetics to our community make us pretty rural. So broadband accessibility gets a little bit complicated. And realistically, we've done a community roadmap for ourselves, kind of a comprehensive plan. And that really gave us an understanding of what our community needs, what we need to really build upon. And one of the big components of that is how we interconnect everybody when you're really rural and you have a lot of agricultural land, but yet people really want to seek your community because they do not want to live in sort of the larger towns, and they want that little more countryistic approach to where they live, and they want to just drive into their, places of work and stuff and go back home, and they really need to be connected in light of that. So that's really the outcome of what we're looking for, is to just create that roadmap at a broadband level and link that into our comprehensive plan at the community level, as well as then start to tie that over into the county level and try to support our county as well in some initiatives. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Troy. A lot of dots to connect over there. I'm going to jump over to Heidi. Heidi, thanks so much for joining us today. I know how busy you are.
Just got it back into the country last night. So I'm Heidi Norman. I am the Chief Information Officer and Director of Innovation and Performance for the City of Pittsburgh. And I'm really excited about being part of this program for a number of reasons. But over the last really more than a year now, City of Pittsburgh has been leading an effort that spans about 20 different organizations, and the county, our city and county governments are actually separate, to really focus on what digital equity and digital inclusion should look like in this region. And I'm very excited because this program is going to help me shift my focus a little bit from sort of the wider region to what it is that we need to be doing specifically within the city of Pittsburgh for our residents. And to that end, because we are a larger municipality, because we have franchise agreements with the larger ISPs here in Pennsylvania, we are not going to be eligible for the BEAD broadband funding for IT infrastructure. However, I do believe we will be eligible for digital equity funds and hopefully for other state and local funding opportunities. And I believe that sort of the structure that the team here has laid out in terms of gathering the information and kind of all having it all in one place is going to make it very, very easy for us to kind of figure out how we're going to, quite frankly, how we're going to pull this off. Given some of the unique challenges that we have among the group of folks that we've heard from today. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Heidi. We're so excited to be working with you. We have a few more people to get through, so I just want to keep our eye on time as we have a special guest coming right after this section. But with that, let me turn over to Rachel.
And then hi, everyone. Sorry, had to find the unmute button. My name is Rachel Kokuga. I am the project manager for Alleghenies Broadband Incorporated. We encompass 6 counties in the South Central region of Pennsylvania, and our focus is really on bridging that digital equity divide, as well as we have a good basis of knowledge of our broadband infrastructure. But I heard someone say earlier, we have a good map, but a better map is better. I feel the same way about data and knowledge. We have some, but more is better. So that's what we're here to gather and use for our communities.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Rachel. Chase, tell us about yourself.
Certainly. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chase Klingensmith. I am a policy analyst who works with Director Norman on this broadband digital equity work. And yeah, I'm just really excited about this whole topic. Pennsylvania has, not the best laws on broadband or the best situation overall. And I'd kind of gotten resigned to the fact that things were a certain way and just thought they would be that way forever. So to kind of see progress pushing back against that, and to see just such a great plan with like Director Norman, I'm just excited to be a part of this. So thanks, everyone.
We're excited to have both of you here. Thanks so much. Those are great grantees in Pennsylvania. I'm so excited about the region. Our next state is South Carolina. All right. You see, who do we have from South Carolina here today? Do we have Chris? Anyone from City of Liberty here with us? If not, the City of Liberty is in Pickens County. We're very excited to be working with them. They're going to be working with our lead agency, RISI, Rural Innovation Strategies.
Sorry, couldn't find the mute button.
Oh, there you are. I thought I had seen you. Thanks, Chris. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I do IT and project management for the town of Liberty. When they came in with the infrastructure money to begin with, they labeled all of the upstate as really good connection all over the place, and little to behold, our broadband that they were calling at the time was just DSL, which maxed out at 7 megs and download at a barely at 0.5. So we're interested in bringing fiber to Liberty and other areas of the upstate. So
excellent. Well, thanks. We are really excited to have you here. We're looking forward to digging in to the City of Liberty together. What's our next state? Virginia. Excellent. We have some great partners in Virginia. Who do we have? Kristen. Oh, there you, Kelly, you are here. Kelly, come on. Talk to us.
Hi, Kristen. I had a doctor's appointment, so I talked to her this morning, so we're on the same page. But yeah, People Inc., we're a community action agency based in that far southwest corner of Virginia, and just looking forward to partnering with the Virginia Community Action Partnership and building on a lot of the good work that Virginia's already done with both infrastructure and some digital equity planning, and really kind of using this to take what we've learned, build on it, and then be ready to leverage the amazing funding opportunities that are out there right now.
It's great. Thank you so much. We have several counties that we're going to be working with together. We're really excited about that. Do you have some of your colleagues with us?
Yes. So Lisa Barton and Sarah Buchanan with Appalachian Community Action Agency, who's going to partner with us, are on here today too, to hear and listen and get launched.
Great. Come on board. Come say hi to us if you'd like.
Hi, I'm Lisa Barton. I'm the Executive Director of Appalachian Community Action, and we cover the counties of Lee, Scott, Wise, and the city of Norton, and we're very excited about this project. We feel like that the digital navigator piece is something we are missing, and that's something we're very excited to get into. So we're glad to be here.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Lisa. We're excited to be working with you. Anyone else from Virginia before we move on? West Virginia. Who do we have from West Virginia here today? Excellent. Annie, come talk to us.
Everybody. So my name's Annie Stroud. I work for an organization called Generation West Virginia, and we're a little bit different, I think, than some other projects, because we're actually covering 18 individual counties and doing 18 distinct plans for all of them. We're technically going to be kind of the LCA for the region, but I think I've got Amanda Amanda's here, and I think, was Marilyn here? She was earlier. I don't see her now, but we're working very closely with our regional planning and development councils in the region that have a really good relationship on the ground. So I know that they were on a little bit earlier, and I think Amanda is too.
Yeah, Amanda, if any of you are here, by all means, raise your hands, come on board and introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Amanda Smar. I'm with Region 4 Planning and Development Council, as well as ROC within West Virginia. So ROC covers about 18 counties throughout the state of West Virginia, and then Region 4 covers 5 counties within West Virginia. So we're excited to work with Annie on this project and help move broadband along throughout the entire state.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Amanda. And Marilyn.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Guerrero, and I work for Region 4. So with Amanda Smart, we work together. I mirror everything she actually has to say, and I'm excited to start on this project.
Well, we're excited to have you. So thank you so much. Thanks for everyone raising your hand. Great to meet you and see you on camera. Have we covered everyone? Is this it? All right. Well, let's just take a moment to offer a nice virtual round of applause for our incredible grantees. Thank you so much for everyone taking your afternoon to spend with us and tell us a little bit about yourselves and why you're here. So with that, I want to say that I am supremely honored to introduce an unparalleled public servant who brings with her a deep commitment to furthering education and expanding public service throughout her home state. Gail Manchin was sworn in as the Appalachian Regional Commission's 13th federal co-chair in 2021, and she was able to become the first federal co-chair from West Virginia. She was nominated by President Biden, which is great. Ms. Manchin, she works directly with ARC's 13 member governors, and together they are able to collaborate to build greater community capacity and strengthen economic growth throughout Appalachia, which increases the region's ability to compete nationally and globally. So Ms. Manchin believes in the power of partnerships, and that in that we really share a vision. She advocates for collaboration across her 13th states, and as federal co-chair, her top priorities are to support the greater economic opportunities for the Appalachian region. Many of you will know her as the former First Lady of West Virginia, but let me please join me in welcoming Gail Manchin.
Samantha, thank you so much. I appreciate that warm introduction. I'm sorry I didn't get to hear all of the introductions. Am I coming through okay? And
you are
okay? All right, wonderful. So good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited to be here today as the federal co-chair of ARC and to speak with Connect Humanity's partners. Before I get into, certainly Samantha gave you a little bit of background about ARC and what we do throughout Appalachia, collaboration being such an important part, and how we have since 1965 been working in concert with local governments, community leaders, and the private sector to enhance the resilience and economic vitality of Appalachia's 13 states, 423 counties, 26 million people. And as she mentioned, about the 13 governors are my commissioners this year. Governor Andy Beshear from Kentucky is my state co-chair. And so it's important to remember as we talk today that our funding does take a bottom-up approach, which enables local communities to tailor their needs and their wants to up through a state match and then a federal match, so that both local communities are being heard, states are being heard, and ARC becomes sort of the third leg of that stool to make these investments and projects a reality. So within the ARC, our funds always have to meet one of our 5 strategic investment priorities. And those are building businesses, building workforce ecosystems, building regional culture and tourism, building leaders and community capacity, and building the Appalachian infrastructure. Obviously, that last investment priority is why I'm so excited to be speaking with you today. Connect Humanity actually became our first multi-state grant. And so there's many reasons to be excited about this, but certainly at the top of my list, that's one of them. We believe at ARC that all Appalachian residents deserve access to reliable, affordable, and energy-efficient utilities and infrastructure in order to successfully live and work in their region and to have parity. And broadband access is a critical part of that. ARC's 2022 chart book, which is our annual data report on Appalachia, shows that more than 85% of households nationwide have a broadband internet connection. But more than 19% of households in Appalachia are lacking one. So going back, that in the 1960s, our top priority was the creation of a highway system that connected our communities, the concrete highway. Now we're focusing on that new highway system, the broadband highway. And broadband connectivity is essential, as I said earlier, to not only connecting our communities, but to connect us to the national and global opportunities that are out there. It's essential for business, it's essential for our day-to-day life. And I think it took the COVID pandemic to really shed a light on the need for broadband in all of our communities, particularly out to the last mile of our rural roads. During COVID, our residents had trouble connecting to telehealth appointments, online opportunities, telework, and certainly students were not able to connect to school virtually when schools were closed. So as we move into the next era of our region's futures, we cannot allow rural residents to be left behind in this way. And so as we talked about our multi-state initiatives, this is just one of the reasons that I am so proud that Connect Humanities, again, I reiterate that, became ARC's first multi-state awardee. ARISE stands for Appalachian Regional Initiative for Stronger Economies. I call it multi-state, but it was funded by the bipartisan infrastructure law, which with the goal of driving large-scale regional economic transformation through multi-state collaborative projects all across Appalachia. As part of this, we awarded Connect Humanity with a $6.3 million grant to help bring broadband access and growth to all of you, 50 underserved communities located in every sub-region of Appalachia. So what I love so much about ARISE and Connect Humanity's work with its partners is that emphasis on collaboration. Collaboration has always been a big part of life for us in Appalachia. Helping our neighbors is part of our heritage. And with that in mind, we need to think of all Appalachians as our neighbors. not just within our own communities, but across state lines, across county lines, and of course, across organization lines. Thinking regionally, not as 13 states, but as the Appalachian region, is truly the key to Appalachia's future success. At ARC, we are not just asking our communities to work together, but we are modeling that collaboration by working with other federal entities. You know, it's important if I'm asking states to work together, then what am I doing at the ARC? And so we recently partnered with the Consumer Outreach Division of the FCC to raise awareness for their $14 billion Affordable Connectivity Program. As you may or may not know, this program reduces internet access barriers by providing eligible households with up to $30 per month to cover internet bills. So that means that nearly 3.5 million households in Appalachia qualify for these benefits. But unfortunately, only 41% of those individuals are actually connected. So together with the FCC, ARC coordinated a 4-state tour through Maryland, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, and met with over 65 local leaders to help them develop outreach and enrollment campaigns for the Affordable Connectivity Program. We also prioritize our partnerships with our state and local partners, such as our local development districts, our LDDs, which are those individuals that have their boots on the ground doing the work every day in our communities. The growing rural-urban digital divide is not only between the region and the nation, but it's also between the region's rural and urban communities. So these local community projects are very important to us. Let me give you a few examples. Unicoi County, Tennessee is classified as an economically at-risk county, and broadband is essential for helping residents in that region to connect with larger opportunities. Thanks to an ARC Power Grant, which is our grant that helps revitalize Appalachia's coal-impacted communities, Irwin Utilities was able to install fiber optic cable to reach businesses and residential subscribers. As a result of that, 30 businesses and 680 homes were connected to high-speed broadband service, including the Unicoi County Hospital. In Garrett County, Maryland, the county's most recent broadband strategic plan notes that roughly 6,000 county households are unserved by broadband. Another ARC Power Grant is helping the Broadband Customer Connect program install broadband conduit into the county, extending the deployment of fiber broadband services to 300 homes. And while it's easy to think of these numbers as statistics, understand that these are people. This broadband connectivity around our region is life-changing to individuals. And you know that as the 50 communities that are here today. So thanks to the work organizations like Connect Humanity is doing and the work that you're doing within your community, Appalachians, people, individuals, families, children, parents, grandparents have new opportunities for learning and job growth. They're becoming connected to healthcare services in their own homes instead of having to drive hours to access hospital or healthcare in another town. And possibly, most importantly, they are seeing a renewed sense of hope for the future. The positive change that your work is creating is being noticed on a large level. Just this week, the U.S. Department of Commerce's Economic Development Administration identified regional centers primed for technological innovation and job creation. Out of the 31 tech hubs announced across the country, 3 are here in the Appalachian region, in Alabama, South Carolina, and New York. In addition to that, EDA also awarded 6 tech hub development grants across Appalachia. These tech hubs will help our region create jobs, strengthen United States competitiveness, and certainly help add to our national security. While seeing the creation of job training and how it's emerging in industries such as cybersecurity, we realize again the importance of how we connect all of this together, how we connect us together. And so that's why I believe the sky is the limit when it comes to what Appalachians can build when they have the foundation of strong broadband connectivity. So I hope that each and every one of you realize out there that you are 50 communities, but you are 50 communities working together. You are embarking as partners, as Connect Humanity partners, and to help make sure that we give hope to every Appalachian community, to every household, out to that last mile. I am so proud of all of you as you come on as one of our communities. I want you to know that the Appalachian Regional Commission is cheering you on, proving that collectively we can attain so much more and accomplish so much for our Appalachian region together than we can individually. I wish you all the best. I am thrilled about the work that you are doing, and I look so forward to following your work as you continue on this pathway. Thank you again, and welcome to the group.
Thank you so much for joining us. You really honor us by taking the time today. Ms. Manchin, it's your words are so encouraging and warming. And it's great to know that the Appalachian Regional Commission is really standing shoulder to shoulder with us as we embark on this very ambitious program over the next 12 months. We really look forward to working with your office on this initiative, and we look forward to interacting certainly more.
Well, and I would just bring up, Samantha, this when I was talking there at the end about how with the Department of Commerce and these tech hubs, it is important, and I continue to do that, to reach out across the federal government to our federal agencies to say, here's what we're doing and how can we maximize on that. And so these grants, these 9 grants that have come into our Appalachian region are just a great example that they are seeing the work that is being done throughout Appalachia, and they realize what great opportunities lie within our region, with our people, with our workforce, with our resiliency. And so I think we're going to continue to see really positive things happen. But I think it's important for each and every one of you to appreciate that you're playing a great part in that. And we certainly appreciate, and we continue to say it's a team effort, and we're all part of this team.
Absolutely. I could not have said it better myself. Ms. Manchin, thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to pass it back to Sarah, who's going to move us into our webinar section of our event today. Thank you again.
Bye.
Please stick around.
Thank you. All right, so we're now moving into the workshop portion of our time together. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Sean Gonsalves to talk about the broadband funding landscape, what we're working with, what we anticipate working with. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and pass it over to Sean.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
So my name is Sean Gonsalves. I am a senior reporter and editor and the communications person for the Institute for Local Self-Reliance Community Broadband Networks Initiative. It's a mouthful, but I'm on the community broadband networks side of things at our organization. We track for the past 16 years the birth and development of community broadband networks across the country. And we are heavily involved in the broadband policy space. Our website, communitynets.org, is sort of a news website or Amazon, if you will, of broadband information. And so I invite you all to check that out at your convenience. So today, this next slide here will show what we'll be covering here in this particular portion. And I think this is a good starting point because, these are really exciting times for broadband. I mean, there's so many troubling issues in the world with so much division, but the need for everyone to have access to high-speed internet is one of the most bipartisan issues out there, especially as you get closer to the local level. So today, on what we're going to cover are these some of these things that I have in the bullet points here. So the first thing we're going to look at is what the scope of the divide looks like in Appalachia. Try to quantify the numbers here in terms of who needs to be reached with this infrastructure in particular, and then also all of the digital equity work that needs to happen simultaneous to that. The other thing that we'll cover briefly is we hear these terms unserved and underserved. What does that mean? I'm going to briefly explain that. And then we'll get into the funding landscape, the general sort of how and who's going to pay for resolving this issue, and where and what's really driving the policies and the moment that we find ourselves in. And then I'll talk a little bit about the relationship between the federal government and the funding sources and the various state broadband offices who will be overseeing each state's efforts in what is being called the Internet for All initiative. And then lastly, I'll close with giving you a few examples of what some of the states in the Appalachia region are doing, just to give you a sense of some of the variety that we're seeing across the nation. So we can go ahead and get into the next slide. And let's talk just for a moment, because you'll hear the words unserved and underserved all the time. And so everyone needs to know what that means and, of course, why that matters. And so without getting into all of the sort of the technical details, unserved are addresses or locations, whether they be households, businesses, community anchor institutions that do not have access to high-speed internet because the infrastructure simply isn't there. And then underserved refers to locations, addresses, household, businesses, community anchor institutions and the like, who have some service, but it's really not adequate in terms of, universal connectivity, or in some instances, not adequate in terms of the kind of connectivity speeds that are being delivered. And as it relates to unserved and underserved, the most important thing within the context of funding is that in the infrastructure bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, it defines, it says that unserved locations are the first priority of funding. In terms of what the states are going to be focused on as the first priority. And then underserved refers to areas that will be sort of the second priority. Now, depending on the state and the amount that they have, various states have various opinions as to whether or not the funding is adequate to take care of all of the unserved. And then with the, I guess you could say, the leftover money, as it were, we'll focus in more on the underserved areas. And so on this next slide is where we can get into a bit about quantifying. What are we talking about, the scope of this? And so this slide here is based on the FCC data, which most people in this, well, there's near universal agreement that the FCC data isn't as precise as we would like it to be, but this is the best data available. And it's certainly what is driving the funding amounts and mapping and targeting where these funds should be directed. And so here we look at a breakdown of each of the 12 states in the Appalachia region, and we're looking at the number of unserved locations just within the Appalachia regions of each of these 12 states. And again, unserved meaning the numbers of locations that do not have access to broadband. And it's important to note on this slide that when we say the number of unserved, we're not talking about individuals. We're talking about households. We're talking about businesses. We're talking about, in some instances, multi-dwelling units, apartment buildings. So these are not individuals. These are, think of these in terms of households and businesses, and in some cases, apartment buildings or dwellings that have, more than one unit with residents living in each. So as you can see here, West Virginia, of all of the states in Appalachia, have the highest number of unserved locations, 271,000. In the next slide, we will add in the number of underserved locations. And as you can see here, we've got, again, just to remind you, these are locations and addresses, not individuals, but you get a sense of the size and the scope here. Once again, I think, yes, West Virginia, Georgia actually, and Ohio have the highest number of underserved locations in the Appalachia region of those states. In the next slide here, it gives you a sense of the percentage of locations that are unserved. Now, the first thing to note, I think here, is that the majority of locations in Appalachia are considered to be served, even though everyone agrees that the data is flawed. Still, it's the best data we have. And so this particular slide here is meant to show the percentage of unserved locations in each state that are in the Appalachia region. And you can kind of see the variety. Once again, West Virginia has the largest proportion of unserved locations of any of the 12 states in the Appalachia region. The next slide here gives us a different way of looking at it. Given that the priority will be on unserved locations, this map here shows how much of a priority Appalachia regions will be within each state. And the good news, particularly for West Virginia, is 100% of the unserved locations in West Virginia are in the Appalachia region. So in West Virginia in particular, that is going to be the primary area of focus in terms of funding. Now, on this next slide here, this is that shows the BEAD allocations. This is the big bucket of funds in the Infrastructure Act devoted to building infrastructure, the physical networks in the Appalachia region. And each state, the infrastructure law was written where each state got a minimum of 100 million, and then the extra money they got was based on a formula that, I'm oversimplifying, but is basically based on the number of unserved and underserved locations in each state, with some, high cost location for stuff mixed in as well. And so that's why you see the varying amounts. And so states that obviously that have the higher number of unserved and underserved locations will get a bigger a BEAD allocation. So we can see some of these amounts. We've got Pennsylvania and West Virginia getting 1.2 billion. Kentucky's going to be getting 1.1 billion, Georgia 1.3 billion, and so on and so forth. And so this gives you, overall, of these slides give you a sense of the scope and the locations that the infrastructure law and what the state grant programs are particularly focused on in terms of funding building out infrastructure in areas where it does not exist or where the infrastructure is not adequate. Yes, and if there's questions, please drop them as I go along. If there's a word that I'm using that is unfamiliar or a concept that's making you scratch your head, please don't hesitate to raise your hand. This map here is a heat map, and this is really to show you sort of the concentration across Appalachia of where the unserved locations are and where the underserved locations are. So you can see the orange regions are the unserved locations where those will be priority areas where they'll look to build new networks in those orange regions in particular. By contrast, of course, the blue regions, and some people have accused me of being colorblind, so if that's not blue to you, then I apologize. But it's a sort of a shade of blue in my eyes. Those are the areas that are considered to be served. And then you can see if I don't know if the screen's big enough, but there's different splotches of yellow areas, and those are the underserved locations in the Appalachia region. Now we can get into the general funding landscape. And now that we have a sense of the size and scope of the divide and have quantified that, we can look at where is the money coming from. The bulk of what states are spending on broadband is coming from the federal government. And there are different buckets of funds. And with each bucket of funds, there are slightly different spending rules that are associated with each. Now, in years past, some states have had broadband offices. Most states didn't. They're setting up broadband offices or have set up, but they're in their infant stages of standing up those offices. But in years past, whether you had a broadband office or not, many states have used state dollars to fund broadband projects in years past, or relied almost exclusively on the private market making investment decisions in terms of where infrastructure should be funded and service should be available. And now that state broadband offices have been established, they've been established essentially to manage these federal funds in what are called competitive state grant programs. So there'll be a competition, there's scoring rubrics to decide which projects will get what funding and how much. The next slide, we get into a bit about some of the money that's already been allocated and is out there. So sort of the first large tranche of funding that states and localities received was money from the American Rescue Plan Act. Now, there's even within the American Rescue Plan Act, there were sort of different buckets of funds and what you could spend it on. And so part of the American Rescue Plan Act included $350 billion that they refer to as the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. And there were an array of infrastructure projects that states or communities could use that money towards, which included things like water and sewer, but you could also use it for broadband projects. There was a separate, with the American Rescue Plan Act, there was a separate bucket of funds known as the Capital Projects Fund. That was a dedicated fund of $10 billion specifically for broadband infrastructure projects. That first bucket of money in the American Rescue Plan Act, some went to states, some went directly to localities. With the CPF funds, the Capital Projects Funds, these are funds that were awarded to states. And in, I think, every state, though, that bucket of money went into whatever existing broadband programs the state was administering. And I should point out that a lot of states and localities didn't really realize this out the gate, and may have recognized this a bit too late in terms of making funding decisions or how they were going to spend their rescue plan money. But it turns out that the spending rules with the rescue plan funding as it relates to broadband are much more flexible. So, for example, in the infrastructure bill, when they talk about unserved and underserved, they define unserved by speed alone, essentially, and underserved by speed alone. With the rescue plan funding, there was a little bit more of a broader definition of how you could define unserved and underserved. You could take into account things like reliability and affordability. Those kind of metrics are not a part of the BEAD allocations. And so the rescue plan money is where you have the most flexibility. Then in this next slide, this was an ongoing program. The Agriculture Department, USDA, has the Reconnect program, which is specifically for eligible rural communities. And it's both a loan and a grant program to build broadband networks in eligible or rural areas. And eligible applicants include private internet service providers, states, local governments, but also electric and telephone cooperatives and tribes as well. And as I said, it's both a loan and grant program. So that means that that applicants can apply for like 100% grant, or they can apply for 100% loan at favorable rates, or they can do a combo of a 50-50, 50% grant, 50% loan. And with each project, there is a $25 million max amount per project. This is an ongoing program that existed prior to the infrastructure bill, although when they passed the infrastructure bill, there were some funds from the infrastructure bill that were dumped into this Reconnect program. The next slide here, this has already occurred, but just to give you a sense of the funding landscape, the RDOF fund, which is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, this was a reverse auction. This is a FCC program where they budgeted for $20.4 billion. And essentially the way it worked was that private providers and electric cooperatives could bid on project areas in rural communities. There's been issues with the program, including a number of the ISPs who were awarded bids ended up defaulting and lost the award. And so, of course, in those areas, it's not exactly clear what will happen with those projects, but it matters, of course, because in areas that are defaulted, there's folks who are chomping at the bit to get this kind of infrastructure in place, and in certain areas under RDOF that won't happen. So far, of the $20.4 billion that was allocated for RDOF, $6.4 billion have been awarded and allocated. And so there's a real question though right now as to what the FCC will do with the remaining $14 billion that's currently sitting in the RDOF fund. And this map here is from the Cooperative Network Services, but it just will give you a sense of what rural areas in the country have been targeted by these RDOF grants. And as it relates to sort of the interaction between BEAD and RDOF, it basically varies from state to state. There are some states who say, if it's an RDOF area, we won't use BEAD funds because we don't want to duplicate. Other states are saying, well, RDOF might not do the trick. And so we may look to supplement some of those areas with BEAD funds. Now, the next slide, we get into kind of the meaning of the moment and what is driving all of what the states are doing in terms of their strategy and structures and some of the rules around spending rules around investment. So as many of you are familiar with, I believe it was November of 2021 when the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was passed. It represents, among other things, the single largest federal investment in broadband in United States history. And so you hear lots of folks, including myself, say that this is very much akin to rural electrification, the national effort to bring electricity to rural America about a century ago. In the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, $65 billion was set aside to fund broadband expansion in all 50 states and U.S. territories. The biggest bucket of funds in all of this funding is the BEAD program, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. And these are funds to build physical networks. as I mentioned earlier, each state gets 100 million plus the additional amount based on the number of unserved and underserved locations in each state. So this is the big bucket of funds here. And the good news, especially for the Appalachia region, is that the way the BEAD was designed and the way the law was written and it was intended to focus most of the infrastructure dollars to go to rural areas that lack the infrastructure to deliver high-speed internet access. And so this next slide will give us a bit of a sense of where we are in the process. So initially, in order to participate in this program, every state had to submit a letter of intent. Every state in U.S. territory has done that. That means everybody's on board with the BEAD program. That's in the rearview mirror. Now, in order to unlock those BEAD funds, the infrastructure law required that states submit certain documents and answer certain questions that really explain in detail how each state envisions spending this money in compliance with the infrastructure law. And so the first part of it is that each state had to develop a 5-year action plan. And most states, it's a pretty extensive document. In some states, it runs, several hundred pages. In other states, it's dozens of pages. But it's essentially an outline and a description of the digital landscape in each state and how the state is currently thinking about what the challenges are in terms of getting broadband to everyone and how the state plans to approach how they'll spend the BEAD dollars and where they'll focus, et cetera. Almost every state, and maybe now every state, has their 5-year action plan in. And the NTIA website, NTIA is part of the Treasury Department. What is it? The National Telecommunication Information Agency or something to that, but they are administering the BEAD program. They're the ones who are in charge of these funds. And one of the reasons why they were given that authority is because Congress felt that the FCC in the past hadn't done such a great job, particularly with RDOF, and thought that the federal dollars would be better spent by allowing the states to make decisions as to where these funds should be spent. So after the 5-year action plan, the law requires, there it is, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, not agency. Thank you, Yokai. So most states have got their 5-year action plan in, which is a requirement to get the funds. And then another requirement is this thing that they call the initial proposal. And in the initial proposal is a more detailed document that not only includes the information that's in the 5-year action plan, but also lays out how the states are going to do their challenge process. And without getting into the weeds and the technical aspects of it, the challenge process is really about internet service providers and states and localities trying to get a more refined sense of what will be considered unserved versus underserved and kind of getting that map a bit more precise and accurate. Once the NTIA approves the initial proposal, that is what unlocks up to 20% of each state's BEAD allocation. Then there's the challenge process. Now, the only state, the state that's furthest along in this is Louisiana. Louisiana right now, I believe, just opened their challenge process. They've already had their 5-year action plan approved. They've got their initial proposal approved by NTIA. Now they are in the challenge process. And then that leads to the last bit, which is that unlocks the rest of the funds, which is the sign off from NTIA on the final proposal, which includes everything that I just mentioned, plus a description of the various projects that the state is eyeing and how they plan to award and what the rules are around awarding those funds to individual projects. Now, where we are right now, most states are in the process of submitting their initial proposal. The way the timeline works is basically every state needs to have their initial proposal to the NTIA by basically the end of December of this year. So it gives you a sense of when the money is going to be coming and when you might start seeing projects being funded. Now, in the next slide, this is all infrastructure stuff. Now, in the next slide, this is another very important aspect of the infrastructure bill, which is, you've heard this phrase, if you build it, they will come. Well, when it comes to broadband, yes and no. There's other barriers to broadband adoption or folks getting online than just whether or not the physical network or service exists in their area. There's any number of challenges. At the top of that list, of course, is affordability. But then there are, millions of Americans who need some digital literacy training, who need to feel comfortable in using these technologies and being able to navigate their way online. Some households have issues with, even if they can afford the service, there's device access issues and how all of that stuff fits together. There's enrolling people in, as Ms. Manchin mentioned earlier, the Affordable Connectivity Program. So all of these things are meant to work hand in glove. The money, the BEAD dollars for the physical infrastructure, and the Digital Equity Act, which is funding specifically for digital equity initiatives, sort of all of the non-infrastructure funding around broadband to increase broadband adoption. In the Digital Equity Act, it was $2.75 billion, and that is to fund 3 different programs. The first of which is the State Digital Equity Planning Grant. That was $60 million, which states have already received based on a formula. NTIA is at their site. You can go there to find out how much, your state or each state has received. And this is for these were the funds for states to begin the planning that they need, because the Digital Equity Act, like the BEAD, requires that each state put together a digital equity plan. NTIA and the federal government were encouraging states to kind of do those things simultaneously. One state like Maine combined their 5-year plan with their digital equity plan in one document. Most states are doing their 5-year action plan on BEAD separate from their digital equity plan, but still all of this stuff is meant to work in tandem. And so the State Digital Equity Planning Grant was funds to help states put together those plans. The Digital Equity Capacity Building Grant, that's $1.4 billion, and that will be split among the states as well. And that is really to sort of beef up the capacity to implement the state's digital equity plans. And then that third program, the Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program, the $1.25 billion, is meant to support the actual programs on the ground. Once the plan is in place, once things get executed, there's going to be need to be some funding to sustain those programs moving forward. And I'd like to say that the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, which is one of our allies in this work, they are a treasure trove of information on all things digital equity. This next slide, which they were actually NDIA shared with us, is the sort of the estimated timeline for the Digital Equity Act funds. So as I mentioned, the planning funds, we're past that. The states have got their planning funds in place to help them develop their digital equity plans. And then by the spring of 2024 is when the NTIA is going to open up that second program, those capacity grants. So we're not quite there yet. We're still in the phase of each state developing their digital equity plans and getting those signed off on. The capacity grants are coming up next. That's expected to open up in the spring. And then states will start to receive those dollars next summer, early fall. And then that will unlock the third program, which is the competitive grants that the states will be allocating to individual organizations and localities and such to implement these digital equity plans at the local level. And the NTIA will open that process up in around the fall of 2024, so that by the winter of 2024, the beginning of 2025 is probably when local organizations will begin to see some of those digital equity program dollars coming in. Now, the next slide here, and this is something else that Ms. Manchin put on, but this is also a super important component to what was also passed in the infrastructure bill, the Affordable Connectivity Program. This is a program that essentially subsidizes monthly internet bills for eligible low-income households, essentially, households that are on the free and reduced lunch programs. I think that meets the criteria for the federal guidelines, poverty guidelines. And so that program was established with a $14.2 billion fund. And again, $30 a month. Now, in some areas, there are low-cost plans where $30 a month pays for just about the whole bill or the whole bill. But in other areas where where the lowest tier plan may be a little bit more than that, it's still a significant benefit. And on tribal lands, it's a $75 per month stipend. And also, as part of this program, there is a one-time $100 subsidy for internet-connected devices. So the ACP is an extremely important program. However, next slide. It doesn't have an infinite amount of funds in it. As I mentioned, there's $14.2 billion that's been put in this program. Now, we built this dashboard, which is the slide, which is part that you see on the right, that what I think is a pretty beautiful looking graphic there. You see the United States there and what have you. And we built that because we were trying to figure out at current, and this is an iterative thing. So every 2 weeks, this is updated with numbers from USAC, where these dollars come from. And it's meant to track state by state down to the zip code level. There's a congressional district overlay in this map, and it's meant to track how many households are enrolled. But one of the questions we were looking to answer is, when will this fund run out? And now everyone is now aware that the ACP right now is on track at current funding rates. There's 52 million eligible households. There's about 20 million enrolled in the program. We're talking about a $600 million a month burn rate. And right now that fund is scheduled to be depleted about April of next year. It's a major concern. And so time is running out. There are a number of efforts underway, advocacy to save this program. In Congress now, nothing has been formally introduced to replenish this fund as of yet. There's talk of, a new farm bill and putting money in there. There's the supplemental budgets, et cetera. I know that I've heard in the past 24 hours that it looks like the White House is going to be requesting an extra $6 billion for this program. But it's important that this program is not only an important program to get people online where service exists and where the infrastructure is there, but I think it's also actually something that sometimes gets overlooked. It's also a very important program in terms of business models for serving in rural communities. If you are a internet service provider and you are trying to make a business case, but you know that there's a significant chunk of or a sizable part of a community in a rural area, which is already difficult to build in, not just the topography, but just in terms of the sparse population and the high capital cost, you need to be able to rely on, if there's a segment of the population that would get your service but will need ACP, the ACP becomes a fundamentally important part of sustaining the viability of these networks moving forward. And so this is an extremely important program. But as you will probably hear in the digital equity space, if it's not affordable, it's not accessible. And so affordability is a key part of the accessibility question, even where there's service in place. Although we do think it's important to keep in mind that the ACP, and I'll get back to this towards the end here in a few moments, but the ACP is addressing the consequence and not so much the cause in terms of why is internet service so expensive in the first place. Now, these next few slides, I'm just going to go through fairly quickly, which is just to give you a sense of how, I think you've heard about, each, the way the country is sort of set up with 50 states, and each state is sort of this laboratory of democracy. It's very similar as it relates to broadband. Each state, within the bounds of the law, each state are doing something, are doing various things and have various approaches. And in the state of New York, there is the effort there is called the Connect All Initiative. And that is $1 billion office in New York. New York has set aside $1 billion to address broadband connectivity in the region. And one of the interesting things that New York is doing is they've established for municipalities and nonprofits something called the Municipal Infrastructure Program. And these are funds specifically dedicated for municipal broadband projects. That's publicly owned, locally controlled networks. And this is being done in collaboration with the New York Power Authority. And, you know, we heard earlier someone here involved with the Southern Tier Network, which is a middle mile network in the state of New York. And one of the reasons, the primary reason why they set up this municipal infrastructure program is because New York recognizes that it's actually pretty hard to attract private investment and private providers to rural communities because it's difficult to make a business case for capital intensive projects in sparsely populated markets. Now, so far, the municipal infrastructure program is off to real good success. You've got the village of Sherburne, which is in, and I'm not going to pronounce this right, Chenango County, which is in Appalachia, but there's also 3 other towns that have received grant funding from the Connect All initiative, the town of Nichols, Diana, and Pitcairn. Now, in the next slide here is a different approach where in Virginia, maybe I switched the slides around. Can we go to the next slide and then back up? Thank you very much. Oh, Sarah, you're so good. Thank you. So in Virginia is very much leaning heavily on the state's investor-owned utilities and electric cooperatives to bring fiber to rural areas. And so to that end, they've established what they call the Utility Leverage Program. And that is to target bringing fiber into rural parts of the state. And as we get into a more in-depth discussion with Tom, I'm guessing he'll be talking about this as well. But fiber is very much a part of the electric utilities. It's a very important technology in terms of monitoring their electric systems. And so many electric cooperatives have built fiber networks to monitor the SCADA systems and are, overbuilding their networks to extend it to be a fiber to the home network because that's what their members want. Investor-owned utilities, fiber networks are also very important. And the state of Virginia recognized this and said, why don't we work with the utilities and the electric cooperatives to try to extend fiber out into unserved rural parts of the state. Now, for this particular program, it's being administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development in Virginia. They're administering these funds, and folks that are applying for these funds in the state of Virginia, it can be local governments, it can be internet service providers, or it can be utilities themselves. And then already Dominion, one of the big power providers in the state of Virginia, has been working with Surrey County. They've been working with the Prince George Electric Cooperative, the subsidiary of the Prince George Electric Cooperative that is providing fiber internet service. So they are now laying fiber. They've already connected about 7,000 subscribers, but their largest project so far is with the Northern Neck, is in the Northern Neck region of Virginia, where they're deploying hundreds of miles of fiber. They're working with several counties, as you can see here on the slide, and also the Northern Neck Electric Cooperative. The next slide here is an example of how it's not just, again, when we're talking about this, we're talking about not only infrastructure, but digital equity as well. And it's super important that we don't disconnect those two things as if they're separate. They both work hand in hand. Now in Tennessee, they have an interesting digital equity initiative in a program that they call the Broadband Readies Community. And what's interesting to me about this program is that it's a non-competitive program, and where counties and local governments can get up to $100,000 to work on digital equity initiatives in those localities. And what's unique about this program is that it specifically targets low-income communities. And why I think it's interesting that Tennessee made this a non-competitive program, it's, they were like, well, let's not make low-income communities compete against one another. These are resources that every low-income community in Tennessee needs to have access to. And so that's why they structured this program that way. They're right now in the middle. The application window is now open. The deadline ends in a few weeks. By the way, the Tennessee Economic and Community Development Department is also who will be administering the state's BEAD funds. Now, one thing I should point out about Tennessee is that Tennessee, like several states in the Appalachia region, have preemption laws that prohibit municipalities from getting into the broadband business, or prohibit nonprofits from getting into the broadband business. In Tennessee, the law specifically is that only cities with electric utilities can get into broadband. And if they do, they can't offer broadband service beyond their service area. So probably most folks on this call and at this webinar are familiar with the world famous Chattanooga, Tennessee. You know, it's a world-class, one of the best and fastest and affordable fiber networks in the country, Chattanooga. And I look at Chattanooga because it would be wonderful for that to be replicated in other parts of the state, but there is a challenge there with the preemption law, as there are in other states. But in Chattanooga, they've done so well that even without the Affordable Connectivity Program, they are able to offer for all low-income families in Chattanooga or in the Hamilton County School District, which is 17,000 households, they're offering free fiber service for a decade to each one of those households. And it's because they've got different incentives. They've done so well that they're able to do that. So that's a particular community that's probably not as worried about the fate of the Affordable Connectivity Program as a lot of other communities are. And now let me just sort of wrap up here. I don't know if there were questions that popped in, but I just want to wrap up because I know this is a lot of information, and certainly anything that I mentioned, links and resources will be available. But as we close out this funding portion, there's a couple of things that I think are important to take away from this discussion, which is that, as Ms. Manchin mentioned early on, this is truly a once in a generation opportunity to bridge the digital divide once and for all. I didn't coin this term, but I've stolen it and use it quite often. We right now are in the midst of the broadbandification of America, which is very much akin to the electrification of the nation about a century ago. So this is an extremely important moment. The other thing to keep in mind is that unserved locations are the priority areas. That's what's going to get the most focus, and that is actually very good news for the Appalachia region. And as we saw early on in the slides, the scope of the divide is vast. We're talking about, hundreds of thousands, collectively tens of millions of households across the country. But even in the Appalachia region, we're talking about a significant divide. The other thing that again, I can't emphasize enough is that the funding that's out there now, whether it be the BEAD funding or Digital Equity Act funds, there's funding available out there now for infrastructure and digital equity initiatives, which is to say, initiatives that address the barriers unrelated to the physical infrastructure. Now, we often get asked at ILSR, so do you think this will be enough? Will everybody be connected? It's one of those questions. Of course, it depends. But overall, I think we can say with pretty good confidence that we should expect that the vast majority of rural areas will be connected probably within, say, the next 3 to 5 years, give or take. And that may sound like a long time, but new networks are not built overnight. There are a lot of challenges and things that go in. It's not about the technology or the engineering, but there are a lot of permitting and topography and all kinds of things to consider. And so as these networks are being built, we're talking in, say, the next 3 to 5 years. Now, in each of those state 5-year action plans, not every state, but most states answer somewhere in there whether the state itself thinks the funding that they'll get from BEAD will be enough to cover all unserved and underserved locations. Some states say yes, other states say not quite. And then lastly, affordability will continue to be a challenge, which is why, again, the Affordable Connectivity Program is it's so important that we come up with a long-term funding solution. Even if we get this extra $6 billion for ACP, that will kick the can down the road, another 6 months or so, maybe at a burn rate of 600 million. We need to come up with a long-term funding solution for the Affordable Connectivity Program, because even in areas where there's networks where for most people the service may be affordable, there will probably always be some segment of the population that will need some form of subsidy to afford internet service. And also, lastly, I'll just say that we also, moving forward, will need to begin to think about more structural solutions to bring competition to the market, which is really at the heart of the affordability crisis. So with that, I will zip it and turn it back over to Sam or Sarah.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks so much. All right, so please put any questions for Sean in the chat and we'll get to them down the road. His slides will be available in our public resources folder after our meeting. BEAD is a wonderful opportunity, but it's not the only opportunity out there, and it can be coupled with others. So thank you, Sean, for giving us a preview on the funding opportunities that grantee communities might be considering, and also how those are intertwined with the different pillars of digital equity and broadband planning.
My pleasure.
So maybe we are about halfway through our workshop, so maybe take a little stretch in person, stand up, shake if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to NDIA's Aaron and Katie for our next workshop on Digital Equity 101, and then we'll do a broadband infrastructure workshop, and then Sam will close us out. So passing it off to NDIA.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. And Sean, I feel like I owe you dessert or something next time we're in person. Thanks for the great segue and shout out earlier. As a kind of transition, I want to repost a link that I shared a few moments ago with some resources we have specifically about the ACP program and how you can advocate for or educate your congressional representation and other elected officials on the importance of ACP. We have a lot of great resources there around storytelling, how to get that information out, and emphasize the importance of that program in your community. So we'd encourage you to take a look at those resources, and now is a critically important time around ACP. With that said, we are going to move on to discussion about digital inclusion and digital equity. We'll do intros to ourselves as speakers and to NDIA in a moment. But I just want to note that I think it was 14% of responses in the initial poll said that digital equity was kind of your priority. So I'm taking that as a fantastic opportunity. It's not a competition between digital equity or broadband infrastructure or financial planning. It all goes together. They're all intertwined. And so I think over the course of working on these plans, I expect that the priority of digital equity will increase. And I hope next time we run that poll, we'll see 100% of people saying this is a priority for us in this planning process. Okay, so let's get started with, we'll start out with introductions. First to the couple of us from NDIA who are going to be presenting today. So my name's Aaron Schill. I'm the Director of Research and Programs at the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And in my work, I oversee our support for local communities, local governments, coalitions, and other local organizations, as well as our data and research work, tracking trends in the field and providing resources to local communities and practitioners to help you all collect data and understand what is happening in your communities around digital equity and what needs look like. I'm located in Portland, Oregon now, but I will note I am from Ohio originally and used to work at the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. And about half of our region that we served were Appalachian counties. So have done a lot of work and really understand the needs of Appalachian communities, at least in Ohio, and kind of some of the challenges around both broadband infrastructure and also meeting kind of the other surrounding digital inclusion needs of communities. So I'm really excited to be here today sharing with you and excited to work with many of you over the coming months. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Katie, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here with you all today and was really thrilled to hear so much about your organizations. I'm Katie. I'm a data and research manager at NDIA. for about a year now. And I'm located in Toronto, but I'm from Michigan originally. And I use she, her pronouns. So turning it back to you.
All right, great, thanks. And you'll hear from Katie here in a moment, as well as a couple of our LCAs. But first, a little bit about NDIA. So you're hearing a lot of acronyms thrown around. We are NDIA, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, not to be confused with NTIA, who Sean mentioned earlier and who is administering funds. Understandable if from time to time you get those confused. So NDIA, we are a national nonprofit that advances digital equity by supporting folks like you, doing community programs in your communities. We support practitioners, policymakers, doing digital inclusion work. We are really, the strength of our organization is our network of 1,500 plus affiliates across the country who are doing the on-the-ground work. And we are just in a unique and fortunate position to be able to speak with and hear the experiences across our entire network and bring that knowledge to bear in terms of best practices, in terms of what's working in different communities and what needs look like. So our role is to really amplify the message of folks like you that are doing this work. We have affiliates in all 50 states and most territories, and are working with 23 tribal communities as well. So that's just, and we are a fully remote team. So our team is spread all over the country. We have folks in, a lot of folks in Ohio, actually, quite a few folks in North Carolina, Virginia and the DC area, all up and down the East Coast, and a few folks kind of scattered around the rest of the country as well. So about the work we do, we support our community, and we'll be supporting all of you in your planning efforts in kind of 4 primary areas. So first is practitioner support. As I mentioned, we learn from and then amplify the messages and best practices of practitioners doing digital inclusion work all around the country. And we'll share just a few examples of that kind of as we talk. We'll show what that looks like. Additionally, we have a policy team that does policy work at both the state and federal levels. One example of that is the Affordable Connectivity Program information that I shared in the chat. We are also very focused on the Digital Equity Act generally, both providing guidance and comments to NTIA that on behalf of our affiliate community, and working with individual states as they think through their digital equity plans and then begin to think about their grant programs, which we will talk much more about over the coming months, but Sean did a great job of summarizing. We also work on awareness, so building knowledge about and building the capacity of the digital inclusion field. It's a relatively new field. Some folks, our executive director, Angela, Sam, some folks have been doing this for quite a while, but many of us are much newer to this field. So a large part of our role is building knowledge and capacity for the digital inclusion field. Earlier this month, the first week of the month was Digital Inclusion Week, and we had the largest ever. There were hundreds of organizations and events across the country. We looked at like the reach of our media impacts across the country for folks engaged in Digital Inclusion Week, and it was something like over 900 million media impacts across the country. So just like phenomenal numbers, all kinds of work, great work being done and highlighted during Digital Inclusion Week. And then lastly, a piece that is very close to both myself and Katie's work, which is our data and research. So again, helping you all understand what does digital inclusion look like in your community, and then building knowledge and identifying what works best, doing evaluation of different programs to understand how do we do this work more effectively. So that's just a quick intro to NDIA, and hopefully gives you a little taste of how we'll be working with you all and supporting you all in your planning efforts going forward. So I want to do next just a little bit of level setting before we kind of get into an introduction to digital inclusion more specifically. And to do that, we're going to, oh, I forgot, we have some resources. If you are quick with your camera, you can scan this QR code right now. If you are not, don't worry, it's going to come back up at the end. So if you don't catch it now, I'm not going to dwell on this. You'll be able to scan the same QR code at the end and just get a lot of a list of resources that are available on our site. But before we dive into it, I want to just do some level setting with some definitions, just so we have common terminology and kind of understand when we use certain terms, what do we mean, and just kind of begin from that basic foundation of common understanding. So the first term, I know many of you are familiar with, you've heard this term, you're using it all the time, the digital divide. When we speak about the digital divide, we are talking about the issue we are dealing with. So specifically, it's the gap between those who do have affordable access, skills, and the support necessary to effectively engage online, and those who don't. And most importantly, we know that that doesn't affect everyone equally. So folks in lower income communities, rural communities, communities of color, are disproportionately impacted by the digital divide. The next term that I want to define is digital equity. And that's the goal we're working towards. So that's kind of what we are striving to achieve. We know that it is a never-ending goal. We will always be working toward this kind of long-term goal, the condition where all individuals have the technology capacity needed to fully participate in society, democracy, and the economy. And the way we do that, the work that we do, is what we refer to as digital inclusion. So digital inclusion are the specific activities. Digital inclusion is what you all are going to be developing plans for. So it's getting people access to affordable home broadband, appropriate and affordable devices to take advantage of that broadband service. The skills that you need to really to leverage those resources and do what you need to do online, along with ongoing technical support and all the applications that we all use every day, including being on this Zoom call with dozens of us from across the country. All of that work and helping people access all these resources is digital inclusion. I should note that these are not terms that we as staff at NDIA came up with. These, like most of our work, were informed by and developed by our community. So we worked with practitioners across the country to understand how are they using these terms and what do they mean in their work. And that's what this reflects. And that will be a consistent theme throughout the resources we share with you, throughout our work with you, is we will be sharing the work that we hear from communities across the country. We'll be sharing things that we know work, and we'll do our best to point out examples that are most relevant. So we're not going to necessarily say they had this great program in downtown LA, and so you should try to implement that in your relatively smaller community or county. We're going to be sharing a lot of information and resources from communities that are either in Appalachia or are comparable in terms of how they're doing the work. And again, we'll highlight a couple of those now. Our goal today is just to give a quick taste and introduction to digital inclusion and how we think about that and can support your planning efforts. Hopefully that will spur some questions, so please feel free to put questions in the chat. And then we'll have a lot more conversation going forward about specifically how this looks and works in your community. So I'm going to put you on the spot for a moment. A lot of times we do this in like breakout rooms and we ask people to talk about this. We have a lot of people and we don't have the time to do that. So what I'm going to ask you all to do is answer this question in the chat. So would love to hear from your perspective and from what you know, which maybe you're just kind of getting into the digital inclusion space and just beginning to think about this, but would love to hear what prevents people in your community from consistently connecting to the internet and using it effectively. So feel free to just put, it doesn't have to be anything revolutionary. It can be the most obvious things, but would love to hear a few examples in the chat. So I'm going to pause here for a moment and give everybody a couple moments to think and start dropping in some thoughts. All right, I'm seeing a couple several cost barriers, absolutely. So affordability of internet, affordability of devices, a few lack of skills or lack of time to learn how to take advantage of it. A really interesting comment from Ashley, not understanding the benefits. So if you don't know what you don't know, if you don't know what's available to you, you may not prioritize it. And we hear that a lot. We hear, you know, when asked why people don't have the internet, some people say, like, I don't really need it. It's not that important. And that may be true in some cases, but in a lot of cases, if you don't know what information and resources are available to you, you're not going to know, that's not going to be a priority to you. JP, great. Intimidation by technology. Fear, shame, intimidation are all huge barriers to people, particularly older adults. Particularly, we see people in rural communities that feel like they're behind, and it's really hard to catch up and don't necessarily want to ask for help. Online security is a huge issue. I'm also seeing a few saying underserved or unserved areas. So both of those are huge challenges. Great. So these are all fantastic examples. And these are the reasons why digital inclusion should be a priority and is a priority to folks in your community, even if they're not calling it that. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to actually turn it over to a couple of our lead community agency partners. First, we're going to hear from Colby with Shaping Our Appalachian Region in Kentucky, and then we're going to hear from Annie at Generation West Virginia. And they're just going to very quickly share from their perspective and their organizations and their community, why is digital equity important to them and why are they getting into this work? So I'm going to turn it over first to Colby.
Thanks, Aaron. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's great to be here. It's great to see so many friends and familiar faces in the chat and just on the call. So I'm Colby Hall. I'm the executive director of, wait for it, SOAR, another acronym. So we'll add that to the acronym list and keep whoever is taking meeting notes very busy, which stands for Shaping Our Appalachian Region. And so who we are, we're a nonprofit that focuses on regional economic development in Eastern Kentucky, specifically the 54 Appalachian Regional Commission counties in Eastern Kentucky. Our organization is a convener, we're a connector, and that's why I'm so grateful for some of our direct funders and partners on this call. So I definitely want to shout out and thank the Appalachian Regional Commission specifically for their support of our organization. Connect Humanity, who has become a new friend and somebody that we've worked very, very closely with over the last 2 years or so, and they've been a wonderful resource. The FCC, we were an ACP outreach grant recipient, and then the NDIA, as we have a digital navigator, Ashley, on our team. So who we work with, or I guess in terms of, Aaron, when I read that question and who I think you were targeting, I guess in terms of this this conversation, you know, our region is home to some of the most economically distressed communities, you know, in the country. So what entails in that, it's low-income households, it's individuals without high school degrees, it's individuals without college degrees, it's justice-involved populations, it's individuals with substance use disorder. And so a lot of those barriers have led to Eastern Kentucky's workforce being in a pretty challenging position, specifically something that we track called the prime age employment rate, which is the percentage of individuals that are 25 to 54 years old. That's kind of the bedrock of your workforce. And what we know in Eastern Kentucky is, you know, nationally, that number is about 80%. For us, that number is closer to 50%, which means we have tens of thousands of individuals that are in that age gap, that are on the sidelines, that really our communities need to fill existing jobs and to create new jobs. And that's something that's at the top of our list. And so our organization was started when the coal economy collapsed around the Great Recession time. So jobs and opportunity and prosperity has always been at the heart of SOAR and SOAR's mission in Eastern Kentucky. And that's why we're so excited about digital equity and this idea for these tens of thousands of people that are seeking opportunity or that are on the sidelines. You know, if there is a silver bullet, if there is a magic wand that we can wave, we think it's the internet. We think it's the opportunities that the internet provides. We think it's the equalizing ability of the internet to bring in new opportunities to the region that maybe other sectors can't do all by themselves. And so some of the ways that we've been going about it. And Aaron, if you want to hit next, my next slide. And here's just some of what I just said. We've created an Office of Digital Equity in Eastern Kentucky, and I've got a really awesome team behind me, or that's working, hand in hand with communities on the ground. I want to call out Kim Albright, who I believe is on this call, and Ashley Smith, our digital navigator, and Kelly Pine, who is our digital equity coordinator that is supported by our FCC ACP outreach grant, as well as Josh Ball on our team. And so what we've done is we've created this ecosystem of resources where we try to meet individual people where they are. So kind of our entry point, or what we think is like kind of the earliest stage, is help signing up for the Affordable Connectivity Program, which I won't, get in, as it's been talked about a bunch already. But we feel like, for folks that don't know that there's $30 a month that they can take off their internet bill, we're going to help make sure they know about it and help sign them up. So that's a great service that we can offer, and something that we've been really successful in doing. Device distribution. So our aim, again, going back to that job focus, is our belief that if somebody is, if they need equipment, or if they need a device because they're trying to go back to school, or they're looking for some sort of training, or they're trying to apply for jobs, or, pursue a remote career, or pursue any career, right, where a laptop or some sort of electronic device is needed, we're in a position that we can provide that device for them, and really make sure that that they're getting the full benefit of the internet there. So we do some device distribution, digital skilling. So trying to do some workshops here and there to be able to help folks get those baseline sets of skills needed to be able to leverage the internet to their benefit. Employment search assistance, remote job fairs. So that entry level job, or maybe some of that bridge career, that first job for somebody, right? Just, put yourself in their shoes. Somebody that maybe just got out of the justice system, or maybe is coming back from substance use disorder. I mean, there's a pathway for them to follow, or they're not just going to, go straight into a very high, high skilled, high paying job out of there. So we feel like we have to create some sort of pathway for them, or some sort of, stepping stone into careers like that. And we have some relationships with remote employers that we bring together to be able to employ folks in entry-level positions, but positions that pay quite well, that can allow people to stay inside their communities and work from home if that's something that fits them. And then kind of on the higher side, or the higher skilled side of what we do, we have a really cool program called Code Kentucky that's in partnership with the Workforce Innovation Board, actually out of Louisville, Kentucky. It's modeled after a program called Code Louisville, which is a national model. That's a free 6-month program for folks that are trying to get into software development type roles, or technology adjacent roles. I don't want to say it's just software development, because, for let's say for banks or for hospitals, folks that have specific IT needs, we know that these types of positions are needed by those employers as well. So it's an opportunity for maybe somebody that comes in and has been with us for a while, and they're continuing to work up. This is a program that could be a great fit for them, and to try to get them into higher paying, high skilled positions. So I'll just wrap it up. Aaron, we are super excited about, as this conversation transitions, as we make assumptions around the $42.25 billion that every community gets access to the internet, the conversation is going to move to, what do we do with the internet? It's already there, right? And that's the $1 million question, because we can have this complicated real estate construction project. We could go out and buy a beautiful new car, but if it doesn't have any wheels, it doesn't go anywhere, right? And so we feel like the $1 million question in Eastern Kentucky is going to make sure that folks know how to leverage this asset to their full benefit, to their individual benefit, because it's really about those individual people that are going to be using it. And at SOAR, we don't have bucket trucks, we don't have rolls of fiber. I don't have the ability to climb up a telephone pole and hang it, but I do have a great team behind me, and we can help folks know how to use the internet better to help themselves and help their families. And so we're super excited to do that. And the last thing I think you said is a lesson you've learned: celebrate the small wins. In Eastern Kentucky, like in other parts of Appalachia, it's a lot of big stuff we're trying to solve. It's a lot of stuff that if you allow yourself to get swallowed by it, you don't sleep great at night, because this is something that you're passionate about. And I need sleep. I think everybody here on the call needs sleep. So I try to tell my team, and we at SOAR try not to get so caught up in those big numbers that get really hairy and really scary. And I think what's important in this work is to think about those individual people that we're supporting. And while it may seem small at a grant application, right? The impact that you have helping one person get connected to the internet, get remote employment, there's ripple effects there into what that means in their communities and their families. And we have tons of examples of those. So that's what I'll finish with, Aaron, is celebrate the small wins and don't discount helping that next person in front of you. So thanks all for listening, and thank you for your time.
Great. Thanks so much, Colby. Really inspiring work. And you're seeing some notes in the chat about that also. I'm now going to turn it over to Annie Stroud with Generation West Virginia to talk about their work in neighboring West Virginia.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Colby. It's nice to hear you talk about your work again. I got a chance to connect with them just the other day and hear a little bit more. So my name's Annie Stroud. I am the Broadband Program Director at Generation West Virginia, and we are the technically lead community agency in West Virginia. We are also partnering with Regional Optical Communications, or ROC, which is a consortium of a couple different regions, specifically for those 18 counties in West Virginia. So Generation West Virginia is a statewide organization whose mission is actually focused on attracting, retaining, advancing young people in West Virginia. It's been around for quite some time. I am new to the organization. I just started in April, and we offer a variety of programs from software training program, professional development fellowship, some like career connector services. And in 2020, in working with a funder who's done a lot of good work in West Virginia, we kind of looked at the fact that West Virginia was not getting federal funding for broadband deployment when surrounding states were successfully doing that. And so they approached us and said, hey, can we do a pilot program where you all would be kind of the wraparound technical assistance resource for communities to help them write grants. So our background is really infrastructure. We don't build the infrastructure, like Colby, but our whole program has been built around how do we fill in the gaps from what is already available from existing technical service providers, and be able to, get people across the line when it comes to specific infrastructure development. So, this slide here, the first piece I guess I want to talk about, because I know we're mostly talking about digital equity, but in West Virginia, as we heard earlier, a lot of unserved addresses. So a big push initially was just like, how do we get people connected, or at least on the list? How do we get these projects funded? They might not be connected now, but in the next couple of years, we should be seeing that. So there was a big push around that. We worked closely again with ROC to do a statewide planning study. So we actually have this high level cost and routing for the and underserved addresses. And that's what on the side here, this kind of map on the left is. Kind of an example of what a county is going to receive out of this ROC study. But, as the landscape has shifted around broadband funding, and with the BEAD funds coming down, which are going to cover a lot of the actual physical infrastructure, for us, we really were kind of thinking about, okay, how do we shift what we're doing and respond to the needs of the actual communities? Because the biggest need right now isn't, some communities are still going to need some grant writing assistance to apply for federal funds that aren't going to qualify for BEAD for various reasons. But, the next big hurdle is, how do people use this resource that's coming their way? Again, we're still a little bit ahead of the game because they don't have it yet. Most of them are stuck in permitting. Everyone does infrastructure work, that's kind of where we're at. But where can we support communities in thinking about how to help their people access this resource? So, honestly, we're fairly new to digital equity compared to a lot of the other folks on this call. And, on our poll, that's the piece that I think we're going to need the most support on is how do we develop programs that work for all of these folks, but like, Colby was saying, we have a lot of the same challenges around if people even have internet access, how do we make sure they understand why it's something useful to them, make them understand the tools that are available to them through telehealth, through education, through, parents being able to interact with, the school system's messaging apps and programming. There's so many reasons why it's so important. But for us, I think as far as our approach here is the state's defined, some kind of like high level digital equity goals, but one challenge, I guess, that we're thinking about is a lot of the communities that we're working in, because they haven't had internet service, the discussion of what digital equity and digital inclusion looks like is a little bit challenging when people don't have that resource, I guess. So I think in our framing of the project, that's going to be something we're definitely going to kind of be thinking about and working on. Again, we've got support from the state planning process, and we're really excited about that. But I think, again, going back to the lessons learned, for us, being able, again, to kind of pivot and meet a community and meet the needs of what's actually going on the ground is the biggest thing, as an organization that comes in to fill the gaps and provide, have the flexibility to meet needs that agencies and federal structures aren't able to do. Being able to kind of say like, okay, well, maybe we did this for 3 years and it was great, but that's not actually what we need anymore. So let's not keep banging down that door and think about how we can pivot and use our networks and resources to meet the next kind of challenge that's coming down the pike.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So thank you both, Colby and Annie, for sharing from your perspective. I think part of the work, as was shared earlier, is going to be developing cohorts around this. So we're hearing, just heard from 2 organizations that may be in different stages of developing resources and programs, but are facing a lot of the same issues. So what we're looking forward to over the next several months is how that sharing works and how you all kind of compare notes and learn from each other in what will work best and how to address some of these challenges. So we're going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes just kind of talking a little more specifically about those some digital equity challenges that are commonly seen and how some folks are working to address those. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Katie.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so when we're talking about barriers to digital inclusion, I think I saw a lot of the barriers that we notice across the US come up in the things you guys were mentioning in the chat. So we think about barriers kind of like broadly in 3 categories. So there's barriers to broadband, there's barriers to accessing devices, and then digital skills becomes a barrier to using those devices or that connection that you, even if you're able to get those. So under broadband, like a huge issue that I saw a lot of you guys mention, as well as cost being a barrier. Broadband, high speed internet connection can be quite expensive and outside the range of what people can afford. And even if they can't afford it 1 month, maybe not the next. Even with a connection, sometimes unreliable service can be a barrier. I mean, like if you have a connection, but you can't rely on it being consistent during what you need to be doing, then, you might as well not have it. Like you have to be able to rely on your connection being consistent, especially if you're doing, like a telehealth call or something really important like that. And then another barrier we see in broadband is in digital redlining. So that refers to like specific practices from internet service providers that we see higher prices and lower quality of service, and lower relative prices and a higher quality of service in areas, and we like see lower qualities of service in areas that are historically marginalized in the first place. So we have a lot of information about digital redlining studies on our website, and it's really interesting to look into that. And with devices, another area where affordability is a huge issue, especially because laptops can be like hundreds of dollars if a laptop is what you need. And another huge thing that comes up under devices is outdated software, especially like technology is evolving so fast. I mean, it's a cliche to say at this point, but it's always true. Like the programs and software that we used 10 years ago are sometimes irrelevant now. So keeping those up to speed is an additional cost. I mean, you can't just expect to like buy a laptop and then you're set for life. Unfortunately, there's the maintenance and the upkeep costs that kind of continue on. And that can be a huge barrier to folks being able to stay connected and stay digitally included. And then another like area of issues is devices not matching the needs that users have. So for instance, like smartphones are really helpful, and you might be able to like connect to your email and your Slack and your LinkedIn, and it might help your work life in that way, but it might not be adequate for you to use a Word document to create a report, or like be able to write your resume. You might need like a laptop in order to do all those things. So having a device that matches your needs is another barrier that folks face. And then under digital skills, one like major barrier to digital inclusion is just having limited skills, and especially like limited foundational skills, and the kind of fear and shame that comes along with that. I think I noticed someone mentioning like the intimidation of technology, and the kind of fear also of being scammed or having your information, your like private data out there and not knowing how it's being used. It's like not knowing, that kind of fear, and also like that feeling of being left behind, like everything is moving so fast, and that kind of feeling of like, how am I ever going to get caught up to all this stuff that's changing around me? Those can be really big barriers, and like some of the most difficult to break down, but really vital to helping folks get online and meet their goals online, and just kind of showing folks that everyone is in the same boat on some level or another of learning about technology. And yeah, along with digital skill barriers, trainings being accessible is another barrier, especially with foundational skills. It can be, even once someone overcomes that initial like shame and fear and wants to learn more about how to use technology, if there's nothing available in their area, you know, it becomes another barrier to them being able to access that. So luckily, the solutions we also have kind of collected and developed through communication with our community at NDIA, and they fall into the same kind of categories. So providing access to affordable broadband, appropriate devices, and digital skills training are how we can help overcome this divide and these barriers. So just briefly looking at these solutions, affordable no-cost broadband can help folks access broadband. And when we're talking about broadband, that's just, you know, the internet, high-speed internet. And the way FCC defines that in a definition developed like almost 10 years ago at this point is 25 megabits downloading and 3 megabits uploading. But, you know, a study from the Deloitte Tech Trend survey shows that the average number of connected devices in the American household is 21. So if you have 21 devices connected to the internet in your house and you're trying to use a 25.3 internet speed, it's going to be really slow and painful. So that just goes to show that this is already kind of an out-of-date figure, and the standard is moving towards 120 being the minimum acceptable standard of to be defined as high-speed internet. But even 120, a lot of households need more than that, especially if there's folks doing like video calls all at the same time. So with broadband adoption, we're talking about like folks having the ability to access the internet daily at the speed that they need in order to accomplish their goals and the tasks they want to accomplish. So for some people that could be slower, for other folks it might need to be higher, but we're really looking at this from the perspective that everyone deserves to have the connection they need to do what they need to do. So a quick trivia question. If you were paying close attention to Sean's presentation, you might find this easier, but what city was ranked the best work from home city in 2021 by PC Mag? Maybe just put your responses in the chat. A, B, C, or D. San Fran, New York, San Antonio, or Chattanooga? Oh, yeah. You guys were paying attention. Yeah, lots of D. Okay, great. Yeah, so Chattanooga is known as the gig city because as Sean went over, they have rolled out a citywide fiber network way back in 2010, so they're ahead of the curve. So it's great to see a city like this in Appalachia providing that fiber connection to every household. Cool. And then another huge area of the solutions to the digital divide is providing appropriate and affordable devices. So I won't go too much into this, but appropriate, just thinking back to can you use a cell phone to do all the things you need for work? Probably not, but can you lug around a laptop in your pocket and take calls from that everywhere you go? Probably not. So there's different devices that we need for different needs. And there's not a one size fits all approach in terms of what devices people need to accomplish their goals. So just calling out a cool example from Pittsburgh, there's an organization called Computer Reach. And what they do is they run a refurbishment. So they take broken down computers, refurbish them, and then provide them for low or no cost to community members. So, this is a great program, as I mentioned, in Pittsburgh, and something like this might not yet exist in your community, but there's national level organizations that can help you fill this device need with refurbished and low cost devices. And if you want to be connected to those, please reach out to Aaron or I. An example is PCs for People, and we know they work in Ohio and Illinois. And then there's another organization called Digitunity, which works nationally to increase the supply of those low cost or no cost computers and help create the connections between folks handing out those computers and refurbishers. Looking at digital skills training, when we're talking about this, again, we're looking at foundational digital skills, like thinking about before you can run, you have to walk, and being able to use your mouse and a keyboard and turn on the computer and remember your password are all these steps in order to even be able to use email, right? So when we're talking about digital skills, really thinking about all the different pieces of the puzzle that folks might need to be able to put together to get where they need to go. And an example of an organization working with a kind of comprehensive digital skills solution is Digital Connect Initiative in the Gila River Indian community. And they help with device setup, emails, apps. They help folks use Zoom or web conferencing software. They have a digital navigator program that's part of our National Digital Navigator Corps at NDAA. And yeah, it's just a great kind of model of program, and I encourage you guys to look into it more. But for the sake of time, when digital navigators, I heard a few of you mention digital navigators before, and I know we have one on the call as well. But this is kind of like a person who holistically connects community members to all these different solutions that I mentioned. So it's someone who can help provide one-on-one support with a community member to know where to access affordable broadband, know how to acquire an appropriate device, and help them gain those digital skills, whether it's teaching them those foundational skills or helping them get access to other trainings and further studies that they might want to do. So we have a great Digital Navigator resource page with the Digital Navigator like program model available and a toolkit to help start up a program like that if you're interested, along with a lot of great resources. And yeah, totally encourage you all to check that out. So I'm going to turn it back over to Aaron.
Great, thanks, Katie. And yeah, a few people mentioned digital navigators. That is one of two kind of like holistic digital inclusion strategies that we have found works particularly well. And we've worked with members of our community to build the model and kind of replicate across the country. So please check out those resources if that seems like a good fit, or if you want to learn more. The other, oops, we're going to skip the, sorry about that. We're going to skip the video for now. The other is digital inclusion coalitions, which I mentioned briefly before. But coalitions are collectives of organizations in a community that address or are currently addressing or could address digital inclusion needs. They often pool together to raise funding or to go apply for funding from something like your state Digital Equity Act funds. They also raise awareness about digital inequities in your community. So the things that Colby and Annie just shared that they're seeing in their communities. Coalitions come together. It's very similar if you're familiar with the collective impact model. The coalition model that we've kind of worked with our community to develop looks very similar to collective impact, but it's bringing together a number of different types of organizations to address digital inclusion needs holistically in the community. So we polled coalitions across the country. That map that you just saw is a little outdated. We know that there are more. That was done about 1.5 years ago. But there was a glaring lack of coalitions across the Appalachian region, with the exception of North Carolina, where there's a whole mess of them in North Carolina. But a lot of states you're in don't currently have coalitions. And that's one of the things that we might encourage you to consider. So of the 52 coalitions we surveyed, 49 of them consist of nonprofits, 46 have libraries, most have some educational institutions. You see local government, workforce development organizations. A lot of these look like the organizations that you all represent or that you partner with already. Many of these organizations may be doing digital inclusion work already, but don't think about it that in those terms. And so bringing together a coalition helps people understand how they fit into the digital equity ecosystem and how they have a role in helping to address these challenges. So as you engage in your planning process, we would really encourage you to think about how to build a coalition and build capacity in your community. And again, we have a coalition guidebook, lots of resources. You'll notice that there are links kind of scattered throughout these slides. That resource page that I mentioned earlier, and will pop back up here in just a moment, has access to all of those links, and we can also make these slides available. So if you're interested, please feel free to join the NDIA community. Sam put a link in the chat earlier. It is free to join as an affiliate and provides access to our very robust and active listserv, community calls, and others. I'm not going to do a big sales pitch, but if you're interested, you can find more on our site. Here's that resource link again. So I'll leave this up here for just a moment as we wrap up. So just want to say thank you all for the chance to share kind of the intro to digital inclusion. This is just the start of our work. Our hope here today was just to hopefully pique your interest and maybe raise some questions. And maybe help you start thinking about how do you approach this work? How do you think about some of the challenges in your own community? And just give you a taste of how some other organizations and communities are starting to address some of these needs. So we look forward to working with you all as you get into the plans. And as Katie said before, please feel free to reach out to either of us. We'll drop our emails in the chat if you have questions. And with that, I think we will wrap up and turn it back over to Sarah.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks so much, Katie. So I mentioned the open houses that are going to be happening every other week. You can find NDIA at those open houses. So if you have any questions on digital equity as you're going through your planning, you can be sure to find them there. So thank you again, Katie, Aaron. I'm going to move on to our next and final workshop, with Tom. Tom, I will let you go ahead and share your screen. And then Tom, I also have the slides of the grantee communities that will also be speaking, so you can let me know and I can bring my slides back up. So without further ado, I will stop my share screen and Tom, let you take it away.
Okay, thanks very much. Did you want to have Jennifer and David before I jump into the infrastructure slides?
Sure, I can go ahead and do that. Let me.
Okay, so before I dive into the infrastructure, we're going to hear just a few minutes from Jennifer Wakeman, Executive Director of Drive, and then David Gibbons, CEO of Center WISP and from Black Bear Fiber.
Hi, everybody. Sarah, I'm going to assume I'm up since that's my slide. I'm just going to go for it. Awesome. Really excited to be here with everybody today. It was kind of cool to hear some of the stories about what everybody's doing. Shout out to Colby. I'm originally from Eastern Kentucky, so yay for that. Awesome work you guys are doing there. I just want to tell you a little bit about the infrastructure work that we've done. As I said at the very beginning, which I'm sure you don't remember, I'm from Central Pennsylvania. We represent 5 counties in the region. We are an economic development entity. So first thing you should probably note, this is not our full-time job doing broadband. We do all kinds of things economic development related. A lot of project development, site selection, business retention and expansion, all those sorts of things. And we sort of fell backwards into broadband in 2018. And then in 2019, we actually constructed our pilot project. Our region covers, as I said, 5 counties. It's about 1,700 square miles, 260,000 people. And we had the good fortune of one of our counties, Montour County, is geographically the smallest county in the state of Pennsylvania. So at 132 square miles, it was a great place to do a pilot for a fixed wireless network. And I should say I know enough about broadband, or knew enough in 2019 to be dangerous. I have a great team that works with me, and they also knew enough to be dangerous, but we brought in the right kind of consultants and folks to help us get this thing off the ground. So we started with 4 tower sites in 2019, and then COVID happened, and then CARES Act money came down the pike, and we very, very quickly, in less than a year, grew our network from 4 tower sites to 21 tower sites. And that was no small undertaking. We built 3 towers, and then we have pictures of one of our towers going up, and then a couple of silos that we used. I mean, we have gear on the top of one of our major hospitals. We have one on a gypsum plant. So we sort of would beg, borrow, and steal from anyone. And the way we run our network, so that's kind of the infrastructure side of it. It's very much a middle mile network. And then the last mile piece is our public-private partnership. So we're the public entity. We have private partners who are the ISPs, the WISPs, who provide service to the end users. And so we own the network infrastructure. They do all the customer service. And it's an interesting way to do this. There's a ton of stuff I didn't know when we got started. As I said, not my full-time job. One thing I will tell you is there is no one solution to solve the broadband issue across Appalachia. Certainly wireless is one way to do it. We've spent about $3.5 million to date, and our network reach currently is 25,000 addresses. About 19,000 of those are at 120. The other, just shy of 6,000, are a minimum of 25 and 3. So if I can say anything, it's to be an encouragement. If this is sort of not your forte and you've sort of gotten into this because, well, somebody in your region needs to do it, it's okay. You won't die. But there are moments where you think you might. And I think it's really cool that we didn't have a Connect Humanity when we did this originally. We're really excited to be part of a group and sort of do this in a more structured fashion than maybe we've done it in the past. So having this group to collaborate with and talk to and maybe find a shoulder to cry on or scream at once in a while when you need it, it's okay. You can do that. I give you permission to lose your mind because this is a big problem. And yeah, I think maybe it was Colby who said that first. I'm not sure about, like, celebrate the small wins. But it's worth it in the end. But there are moments though when people say, why did you do this? And I'm like, I don't know. But we did it because it needed to be done and there was no one else to do it at the time. That's the simple answer. And that's kind of what we do in economic development. We fill the gap. So just to be an encouragement to you all is sort of my role here today. And we're really excited. We've deployed some really interesting infrastructure. It's all primarily non-line of sight. So it's using CBRS is sort of the technology we're using. But now going into BEAD, we're actually having conversations about fiber, just because, again, it's another kind of arrow in the quiver, and we're willing to kind of try all of the things to get the solutions that we need. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dave, who is actually right next door to me and a good friend. Hi, Dave.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, how are you?
Good.
Hey, everyone. My name is Dave Gibbons. That was a fantastic presentation. We're well acquainted with the Drive Network and a participant, so it's a great organization. And before I jump into my spiel here, I will say, going off of what Jennifer said, if you're not regularly questioning your decision to be involved in broadband, I don't think you're doing it right. So that's okay. Know that you're in good company, and I think that's a very normal feeling in this industry. So I was going to speak a little bit about marketing and digital inclusion, but there's been so much talk about that I think I'm going to go in a different direction and talk about pole permitting. So there have been some discussions about pole permitting today, and I want to share something that we've learned through our operations so far, building out fiber. So again, my name is Dave Gibbons. I'm the founder and CEO, day-to-day operations person for CenterWisp and the fiber brand name Black Bear Fiber. I've been in this broadband world on and off since 2015, and really started going full speed into the wireless world in 2019. We got involved in RDOF pretty early on, and as a result of the way that auction was formatted, we kind of had to make a decision to move forward all in on fiber. And we have been learning how to make fiber happen since then. So I want to share very quickly here some learnings that we've had around how to make fiber happen quickly. Specifically around pole permitting. So there have been a couple folks mentioning pole permitting today. In the industry, the term of pole permitting is synonymous with the other term, make-ready engineering. So this is the process of pole owners who tend to be incumbent power or incumbent telephone companies getting their poles ready for you to attach fiber optic cables. And that process basically involves measuring. So we go out in the field with either laser measurements or very highly calibrated cameras, measuring where power, neutral, street lights, existing comms, things like that are, not only on the pole, but also in the areas between two poles, which we call the midspan. And the problem here, just to highlight it, and this problem needs significant national and public utility commission in each state level attention, but until it gets that attention, we kind of need to work within the bounds of the system that exists today. So the problem is that as organizations like ours are building out broadband networks, we are oftentimes in direct competition with the pole owners. And as a result, they are very disincentivized to work with us because we are taking customers from them, right? So let's call it exactly what it is. When we are building in a rural area and there's an incumbent telecom, we are going to go compete with them for the small number of homes in that rural area. And very likely we are going to take some of those customers from them. We're going to put in fiber and they're no longer going to take a copper telephone line. So they can't tell us no in our case because we are a phone company as well, a CLEC as designated by the Public Utility Commission, but they can kind of put our project in molasses and make it take forever. So without going too deeply into that right now, I want to share something we've learned. The project that I'm going to talk about here is one that was partially funded by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania under the Unserved High-Speed Broadband Initiative. It's about $1.2 million project, 1.25 million project to build 25 miles of fiber in the heart of central Pennsylvania, right near Penn State University, in a town called Tusseyville. So this project was awarded about 18 months ago now. We took it from project award to hanging fiber in 12 months. And I think we're going to take it to completion in about 19 months, which is crazy fast for a fiber project. The way that we did that is we did some pilot projects and found something kind of unique about these incumbent telecom and power companies. The unique thing that we found is that they all tend to contract out their pole engineering. So in the case of an investor-owned utility, I'll use West Penn Power as the example, they have 5 or 6 contractors that are allowed to do engineering and make-ready work on their poles. And those are the only contractors that are allowed to work for them in the country. Interestingly, those contractors are not exclusive to the power company, so you can hire them directly. So what we found is if we go and hire one of the contractors that is pre-vetted by the power company directly, we can have them do the engineering work on our behalf, and then they take off the hat that is working for us and put on the hat that is working for the power company and put all of the engineering work they've already done into the power company's system. So I don't love that that's the reality, but again, until this gets the attention that it deserves, that's the reality that we're working in. And what we found is that if we pay a very small premium, a few $100s a pole extra on the high side, we can hire these consultants directly. And it takes our process from something where we engineer it and then it goes into a pole owner system, and that could take 3, 6, 12 more months to something where we can go from engineered plan to engineering ready for pole changes, replacements, lowers, things like that in anywhere from 3 to 9 months. So I want to share that because it's, again, I don't love the reality of that situation, but it's the way the system works. And when we know that, we can kind of budget for it and be able to deploy fiber more quickly. The other thing I want to point out is it's important to understand who the pole owners are in a territory. Even in deeply rural areas, we've found that because of the timelines under which telephone lines and power were installed, there are often 2 pole lines. So there will be one for telecom on one side of a road and one for power on the other side of a road. So it's uncommon that they share those pole lines, even in deeply rural areas. So my recommendation in these areas is figure out who your competition is. And what I mean by this is there may be a co-op power company that's doing a fiber to the home build? Probably not in this group. So they are your partner. You should try to permit their poles instead of the telecom's poles, because if you can work with the power company and maybe provide some fiber for their SCADA network or some other need that they have to fill, they will make sure that your applications get the attention they need as quickly as possible. And we found that that kind of thing streamlines the process. On the other hand, if maybe they have a network or maybe their poles are dated and there would be a lot of replacements, those incumbent telcos can be partners under the right circumstances. I will point out though, and I'll use our territory as an example, we service a lot of areas that are legacy CenturyLink, what used to be the Sprint network. CenturyLink sold all of their wireline assets in these areas to a very large, very heavily invested firm that I won't name by name, but the point is, why do you go and pay a lot of money for legacy telephone assets, right? You don't. You pay for poles and pole attachments. So we're seeing all this very heavy investment in rural telecom, and the writing on the wall is all of those folks are going to be running their own fiber. So my other kind of learning, and maybe not word of caution, but thing we need to keep in mind is I actually personally believe that in most of these rural areas where fiber builds are underway, there aren't going to be many homes that don't have access to more than one fiber provider. I think due to the way funding is happening, we're going to see the paradigm shift and flip on its head. So there will be, and I heard this mentioned earlier in the call as well, there will be urban or semi-urban areas where there is no fiber to the home, and there will be rural areas 20 miles away deep into the country where residents have access to 2 fiber to the home providers. So the reason I bring this up is if you're looking to work with a rural telco, be aware that they are also running fiber. They're very well financed and they're going to do it as fast as they can. So whatever the legal bounds are around how long they can take to process your permits, you should expect that they will take that long to give you feedback because again, they're your competition.
Well, thanks very much, David. Really appreciate your insights.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to kick off the last session before we give it to Sam for wrap up. Talk about broadband infrastructure, and indeed, we are going to be talking about some of these issues in Make Ready as well. Just make sure everybody's on the same page. If you see 1 megabits per second, that's a million bits per second. A gigabit is 1 billion bits per second. I know most of you know this, but it's a good idea to level set. If the upload and download speeds are different, that's called asymmetric. You'll see common packages like 100 by 20. If they're the same speeds, upload and download, it's called symmetric. And so you'll see packages like 100 by 100. That underlying infrastructure we're grappling with, there's a twisted pair cable that your DSL services come on. There's coaxial cable that the cable companies first installed for video, but ended up kind of retrofitting data onto them. And then there's the fiber optic cables. So this is not a new goal to bring broadband into rural areas. It actually dates back to 1934 when U.S. Congress passed the Communications Act saying all people in the United States shall have access to rapid, efficient, nationwide communication service with adequate facilities at reasonable charges. So we did that with telephone services. We have not yet done that with broadband. And since the internet began about 1990, there's been $100 billion spent by the FCC to achieve this mission. So it's kind of troubling that we're still lacking so much infrastructure. So why do we need subsidy for broadband? It's a common question. This is focused on the state of Ohio. Our state capital's got about 1,500 households per square mile. You jump down to a little town like McConnellsville, it's still 500 households per square mile, which is a viable population density. But then we get into some of what we call the rural expanse, where we're dealing with under 30 households per square mile. And you'll see the entirety of one of our counties, Meigs County, is only 26 households. And you get into some of the other areas and you get well below 20. So 1% of what you see in our state capital. So there's just no way that without a subsidy, you can't have a profitable network moving into these low population density areas. And there is good news. So some of the areas have been funded, and I highlight this location in Guernsey County, Ohio, where we've got the Ookla speed test data here, and we kind of use our own speed scale. Dark red is the worst, below 10.1. Dark green is the best, above 200 by 50. And these are Ookla test locations, and you'll see, wow, terrible service in this area. And in this case, the FCC agreed with us, awarded it to Charter in the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. And now just 2 years later, we are seeing a really big sea change there. You're never going to see all green dots, but you'll see that this rural area that before was pretty much devoid of anything, there's a lot of green dots, a lot of yellow dots. To get a green dot from Charter, you're spending $100 a month to get enough speed from them. So this has been a very significant project, and it helps us see that we can identify unserved areas using speed tests, and that we can also see the progress. So rural consumers will buy broadband at higher speeds. Fiber is sustainable until you get into super low population density. So in deciding what to do, we think it's really important to come up with overarching architectural guidelines. So key objectives. We want the capacity to meet the needs of the year 2055. We need to think 30 years in the future because these are infrastructure dollars. We're supposed to build something that's going to last. Longevity, we want it to last at least 30 years. And we want to reach 100% of the households and businesses. So those key objectives then become key aspects of your planning effort. So 3 technologies, there's low Earth orbit satellite, there's fixed wireless, and fiber to the premise. So we really need that big picture to help guide our investments. So when we go to the DSL, I just like to use a road analogy. If you just stop maintaining roads for a few decades, well, after a few years, you'd have big potholes. After a few decades, it'd basically be a goat path. That's unfortunately what we have with DSL, is the old twisted pair copper. It's basically a digital goat path because most of that copper is 60 to 70, some of it even 80 years old. Well, it was great. It brought telephone services into areas, but actually these days it doesn't even support reliable telephone service, let alone high-speed broadband. So a lot of states are going to downgrade anything that's DSL to being underserved. They think that's really a good move. Fixed wireless, a lot of good information on fixed wireless today. And from a tower that's in a flat area in the flatlands, top of a 300-foot tower, you can see a long ways. You can imagine throwing a wireless signal pretty far. The problem we run into in most of Appalachia is the terrain and the foliage. And I love the terrain and foliage in Appalachia. I live in Appalachia myself in Athens, Ohio, and always feel at home when I get back down into the hills. Not the best thing for fixed wireless. So from a canopy perspective, the higher frequencies you go, the more capacity there is in that fixed wireless signal. And at 1 gigahertz, it'll go right through the leaves, no problem. You get to these faster speeds, it won't go through the foliage. It gets absorbed by the water. GPS and Starlink, 2 satellite services, one for location, one for data. GPS is down on the 1 gigahertz space. Starlink's at much higher frequencies. It also will not go through foliage. Here's an example of a metropolitan area where there's a transmitter on one of these towers, and way over here, 20,000 meters away, they still have a usable signal. But you get that same transmitter on a pole and try to shoot it through the foliage, 100 meters later, the signal is gone. And in Appalachian, Ohio, heavy foliage coverage, and as is in a lot of our Appalachian states. And then terrain is also a big issue. Again, it doesn't matter what frequency you use, it's not going to go through a hill. There's some little bit of lensing effect you can get in non-line of sight, but you can't really count on that. Starlink, yeah, it won't go through a hill either. And we did what we do is we pick representative areas, representative geographies, and then we do a mapping by identifying tower locations. You see these yellow stars. We just picked the best spots we could to put 4 towers, all just a few miles apart, to try to cover this 50 square mile area. And what you see here is in all of these white areas, those are areas that could not see any of the 4 towers in this relatively small area. So all those red dots that are in the white areas are households that would not be able to receive a signal. And these are just terrain obstructions. We did not include foliage in this analysis. And Ohio terrain, again, the gorgeous Appalachians is pretty rugged terrain. So you end up with a lot of terrain shadows when you try to do fixed wireless. So we think it's really important to take a long-term perspective. If you jump back to 1990, that's really when the World Wide Web became something that became popular in the popular culture. And the internet predates it a long ways, but that's when the average person started using it. And if you look at the speeds that people use, and this is a logarithmic scale on your left, it's a 10-fold increase each step up. And plot that out, that we've seen a 10-fold increase in the average bandwidth consumption per decade. So that 25.3 standard, that hasn't been relevant for at least 10 years. And today, the average is well over 100 megabits per second, but I'll just call it 100 megabits per second as the average today. And that's one of my problems with the speed targets. Oh, let's get to 100 by 20. Well, that's just what's available at average speed today. That doesn't take care of the future. So what's next? Yeah, hard to say what Silicon Valley is going to come up with next, but we can certainly say bandwidth demand is going to continue to increase. Will it just keep going on the same curve? It's hard to say. 1 gigabit, totally imaginable. So we're definitely get to 1 gigabit. There's a lot of areas you can get 1 gigabit and faster today. 10 gigabits is this next one for 2040. That's also very imaginable. There are affluent communities today doing fiber to the home where they require that you offer a 10 gigabit package to the residential consumers. So maybe it gets all the way to 100, maybe it doesn't, but let's extrapolate that out. If you look at fixed wireless, satellite, and DSL, they're all going to top out at about 100 megabits per second. Yeah, there's spot locations where you go faster, but generally about 100 megabits per second. Cable modem is going to top out at about 1 gigabit per second. Today, you do some of the upgrades, you go a little bit faster. But fiber is at 400 gigabits today. We can do 400 gigabits. It's happening commonly. So if we look at an infrastructure planning horizon that stretches out to 2055, well, there's only one technology today that can actually meet the needs of 2055, and that is fiber. And these short-term efforts try to patch this up while we wait for the infrastructure deployment, I think are great, but we don't want to mistake them for the long-term solution. So technology neutral is great, but it has to be technology that can meet the needs of 2055. So specifications are also really important. You think about building a road, can't imagine someone putting out a bid for a road that doesn't have a detailed set of specifications. Broadband has not been that way. Broadband has mostly been done based on speed targets, and it's continued to be done based on speed targets. So now it's more common for people to say fiber, and that's great, but fiber comes in a lot of different flavors. So when we're doing planning, we plan on a centralized split as shown in here, where there's one point where you split that fiber connection, and every household has their own strand of fiber, and you've got at least 50% spare strands. So that's kind of our architectural approach. You can skinny down the amount of fiber you install by taking these splitters and spreading them out throughout the region. And now you no longer have a strand coming back to this convergence point for every household. And then there's the distributed tap. That's another solution where there's basically a splitter at every household. One strand of fiber can be extended to support up to 64 households. It's the skinniest option in terms of deploying fiber. So in everything we give you in terms of pricing, we're recommending this centralized split. So again, real different in terms of the cost pictures associated with it. So when you look at a total cost of doing a network, and you're going to hear people say, oh, I can do fiber for $30,000 a mile. Well, you need to find out, are they actually looking at all of the various cost elements? Because, for instance, just the engineering will cost 10% of the project. So you need to make sure that the people are actually talking about, what is their engineering standards and have they priced everything? So in this case, the cost is coming out to about $104,000 a mile. And if we break that down, we've got $40,000 a mile for make ready and $64,000 a mile for the fiber build itself. So on aerial's a really common way to deploy fiber. It's deployed on existing communications poles, usually power poles in the communications space. So this is an example of a person doing strand and lash, where there's a steel strand, and then they lash the fiber to it. It can also do what's called self-supporting ADSS. Major cost factors: are you able to overlash any existing facilities? What's the cost of make ready? If you can overlash, your make ready is going to be lower. And then how many strands are you putting in? So these make ready realities, as David was talking about, are pretty significant. So in the power pole, you've got the kind of distribution of the power, the primary lines, secondary lines that feed the households, service drops go into the house. So you see these various power spaces. Then the communication space is 40 inches below the power space. So what happens is somebody says, there's some minimum clearance you have to maintain. Somebody says, oh, I want to build fiber in this neighborhood. As long as in midspan you haven't violated that clearance, you don't have to replace those poles. But in a lot of Appalachia, of course, we're dealing with hillsides. And so now that minimum clearance has been violated, and one or both of these poles is actually going to have to be replaced. That's expensive stuff. The power companies, and only the power companies, have the ability to do this. They're the only ones who can give themselves permission to do this. They can put the fiber up in the power space itself. And that makes a really big difference in terms of how many poles you have to replace. It's really just structural integrity at that point. You're eliminating a lot of the clearance issues. And it's a big deal. Replacing these poles is tough. One advantage is that you are improving grid resiliency, because some of these poles date back to rural electrification. So they're old, they still have enough structural integrity to support the power. So coming through and replacing them with taller, more robust poles can really help grid resiliency. But these are major construction projects. A lot of the pole routes go off-road, so you end up with tracked vehicles. And we it's really very unpredictable, and you don't know until you've engineered it, filled out all the pull applications, given it to the power company, they review it, and they come back with a price. That's when you find out how much make-ready is going to cost. Your engineers can kind of guesstimate it a little bit just by reviewing what's on the polls. But until a power company gives you the number, you don't actually know what it's going to cost you. And we're seeing it range anywhere from 10,000 a mile to 70,000 a mile. So we look at aerial backbone and distribution fiber. This is everything but the little drop to the house. We're looking at a cost of $75,000 to $120,000 per mile. And that's with a very big make-ready spread of 20 to 55 and a smaller spread in the fiber of 55 to 65. Again, a lot of people are going to be shocked at these prices. This is what we're seeing in the industry for the type of fiber network that we're recommending. So high strand count, strand and lash. You don't already own pull attachments there. And just be careful. A lot of projects have died because they've underestimated the costs. Underground would be the next option. What we're showing here is boring. Boring is our preferred approach. You can also trench or you can plow. When we price this out, we're saying it's bored for the most part. It's in conduit. And the rock becomes a really big issue, is how much rock do you hit? And so we're saying at 10% rock, you're at about $100,000 a mile. At 40% rock, you're at about $170,000 per mile. And again, the fiber build and the conduit, we're going to say it's 80 to 90. And then you have the rock addition, depending on how much rock you hit. So again, high strand count, primarily boring, putting it in conduit, not just direct burying it in the ground, and at a depth of 36 inches. So those are the specs on which we're basing this pricing. Again, really need to be careful in the budgeting. Recommend you consult a geologist to give you an idea of how much rock you're actually going to encounter. So as you start developing your plans, we think it's really important. The first thing you should try to do is see what existing resources, what existing studies have already happened that can help inform you. So for instance, speed test analysis, or at least the raw data. A lot of states have purchased the UCLA data. We recommend the UCLA data because you don't have to do a speed test campaign. You can, it'll enrich your UCLA data. But the UCLA data comes, when you buy it, you license it, you get 1 year in the past, 1 year in the future. You can buy even 2 years in the past. And for like the state of Ohio, I think right out of the gate, we had about 6 million records when we got the 1 year in the past. We're up to over 14 million records for the state of Ohio. A similar experience in Missouri and Florida and Rhode Island. That UCLA just gives you a kind of a jump start on the data. So if your state has that data or has processed that data, or a council of government has done this, just look around and see if anybody has already engaged in that effort. Another is what existing layers, GIS layers, and hopefully you have some GIS capacity in your organization. The existing GIS layers can be really helpful. It's amazing the things you can find on ArcGIS online. You have to kind of vet them because you don't know for sure who put that layer in, but there's a lot out there. And then there's the Esri Living Atlas, where Esri themselves, the company that, the kind of 500-pound gorilla in GIS space, Esri themselves have vetted the layers to say these layers are accurate. So those are two really good sources of GIS data. And then, as I mentioned before, any studies that have already been completed by your county, by your council of government, anybody else, anything the state broadband offices have done. And you can also pull in FCC data, reprocess it to make it more useful. And then the other piece is whether anyone has tried to do project area identification, preferably with fiber miles and locations in the estimate. So I'll give you an example of this. I'll look to Athens County, Ohio, where I live. And these are the speed test data points for Athens County, Ohio. And you'll see, yeah, in Athens itself, and you're never going to see all green. It's always going to be a mix of colors. But in areas where it's all deep red, there's just no infrastructure there. And so when we take that and grade the census blocks, this is the picture that ends up arriving at. And again, we've got our own speed test or our own speed tiers that we use. They've just turned out to be pretty useful in helping communities define the requirements. But this is what the FCC says. According to the FCC, this is the picture of Athens County if we look at all technologies, including fixed wireless. And this is not an anomaly. We've seen this in every geography we've looked at, is the FCC is still continuing to what we call trust but never verify. They take whatever the ISP says, and the picture is pretty stark, pretty bad. When we strip out the fixed wireless, the picture's a little bit better, but you'll see we still have major areas, like in this area, up in the Panhandle here, that we are still very convinced are unserved. When we survey residents, they all say it's unserved, but we've got a cable operator or a DSL operator claiming they can serve these areas. So when we block it out, so we've blacked out here areas that have been funded. So it's mostly RDOF funding. And then we've limited this to the below 5010s, which is kind of what we suggest focusing on, are the areas that are deeply unserved and somewhat underserved. And again, we're looking at maximum speeds. That's something I didn't mention. When we plot this, we use the maximum speed ever seen at a location. There might have been 20 speed tests at a location. We'll take the fastest speed ever seen to try to counter some of the arguments about speed testing. So what you see here is, like in this Panhandle, there's about 4,000 households up there that are going to be excluded from BEAD if somebody doesn't challenge this area. So the BEAD challenges become quite important and pretty easy to end up spotting these sort of problem areas. And then we also like to use Dun & Bradstreet data. And again, somebody may have done this in your area already. What we do is we take the Dun & Bradstreet business data and we estimate broadband demand by weighting based on the type of business and the number of employees. And we've been stunned to see how many businesses we have operating in areas where there's no broadband. And we hear all kinds of workaround stories. Like, well, I wait till 3 o'clock in the morning where my HughesNet's not so bad to upload things. Or I go to the library every afternoon to use the Wi-Fi there. It's pretty amazing the level of creativity that people use to try to get around this. Obviously, we don't want them to continue doing that. And the size of the dot here shows what we estimate the relative broadband demand. So like a healthcare company with 50 employees is going to use a lot more bandwidth than a construction company with 50 employees. They both need broadband, but the healthcare provider needs a lot more. So that's what you're seeing in the different size dots there. And then you want to define project areas. So we define 3 potential project areas for the county commissioners in this county. And then you need to figure out how much you think those are going to cost. So you'll see we've got 74 miles and 600 households, 53 businesses, and so forth throughout these 3 service areas. And this becomes the key metric. How many households per fiber mile? It's the key metric that every financial analyst from an ISP is going to use, is how many households can I pass by building a mile of fiber? Because building the mile of fiber costs pretty much the same, whether there's 100 households or 10 households. So that's their big number that they're looking for, is how many households per fiber mile. So it becomes a question of how low can you go? That if we just say cost per mile is $100,000 and there's 25 households per mile, you're at $4,000 a household to pass them. If you're at 5 households per mile, you're at $20,000 per household to pass them. And even at 20 with $5,000, some people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're going to spend $5,000 for that. But if you divide that over the 30 years of the useful life of that asset, that's $167 per year per household. That seems very worth it. Compare it to water, sewer, highways, things like that. Broadband's really a good deal. So then if for instance, they use BEAD and get a 75% grant, you'll see that house that was $5,000 a mile, they'll get $3,750 out of BEAD, and they're left to cover $1,250. At the other end of the spectrum, they could get up to $15,000 of that $20,000, but they still need to invest $5,000 a household, and that may be testing the market pretty severely. That what we've done, we've worked with commercial ISPs that are backed by venture capital companies. We've worked with rural electric cooperatives. So they have different ranges of appetite for how much they're willing to invest per household based on the rate of return that they expect. So we're seeing a threshold that's pretty wide of $1,000 to $4,000. That even at the top of that range, this one's a problem at $5,000 a household. You may not get people bidding on those areas. And different state officers are coming up with different strategies, like packaging them together with higher density areas to make them more attractive. In a high cost area, you can get 100% of the capital costs from BEAD. So likely players, you're going to see the cable companies expanding. They're generally expanding into territories they already serve. We see that a lot with Charter and Comcast. Gee, they serve a city here. They'll go ahead and expand out into an additional area adjoining that's rural that they need grant money for. The traditional telephone companies, don't have a warm place in my heart because they've gotten $100 billion over the last 30 years to solve this problem, and we're still in this problem. But what they do have are existing pole attachments. So in our little town, Frontier came in and overlashed their existing plant. They were able to much more quickly and much less expensively build. So the telcos have an advantage there. The rural electric cooperatives, they're my favorite. You cannot say that all rural electric cooperatives are interested in this, though. They tend to be very conservative, and no two are alike. And then the ISPs backed by private equity. And then in some cases, nonprofit or community-owned networks. I think that's going to be more isolated. There have been some great success stories, but I don't think that's going to be the dominant solution. So again, the traditional telephone companies, they have a potential advantage in speed to market cost because they can overlash their existing attachments. And the rural electric cooperatives have an advantage in that if they do it in the communication space, they're going to have to replace a lot of poles, but at least it's their poles. They're not doing it for somebody else. And they can also make the option of building up in the power space to reduce their costs additionally. So we think this is a really important fight, really a fight for the future of rural America. And, 20 years from now, do we want it to be untapped and hollowed out? Well, unfortunately, a lot of our communities is pretty hollowed out already. Or vibrant, engaged, and productive. And I strongly believe that broadband is an absolutely essential ingredient. It doesn't solve the problem, but if you don't have broadband, there's no way that you ended up with economic growth and vibrancy that we all want in our rural towns. And a lot of people would like to live in small towns and get their 10 acres and live out in the country, but they just can't because of the broadband problem. It's really clear from a lot of studies that productivity goes up when you move into an area. And, these areas, a lot of these areas, we're not saying we're going to improve their broadband. They haven't had any broadband. They've been in the digital divide since the beginning of the internet age. So the productivity increase is similar to going into an undeveloped country and delivering broadband. So productivity increases should be significant. Average household income will increase. And that's all going to result in increased tax revenues. And in fact, when we've looked at it, the one-time subsidy required to bring broadband into these areas should be repaid in 7 years or less from increased tax revenues. So it's a big win for everybody to make this happen, big win for the country. Really hope we can all make this happen together. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I've got a gazillion slides. I can talk about infrastructure forever, but happy to just answer any questions or turn it on over to Samantha.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. That was a great presentation. Actually, all of our experts have given us so much great information. I want to thank you all for hanging in here. I have one quick poll. This is really sort of for us. It will be anonymous, so don't be worried. I want to know, Sarah, can you queue up our final poll? I want to know if you guys would be interested in being more connected, whether that is through an email listserv, a Slack channel, or if, really you're not interested in additional. I'm not going to read those results out, but I can tell you that your responses will likely inform future releases or lack thereof. So thank you for responding. I'll just give you all just a minute to do that. All right. Sarah, why don't we go ahead and close the poll? Thank you for that. Again, I'm not going to share those, but you'll, I'm sure, figure out what the polling said at a later date. That being said, I just want to offer a round of applause for our wonderful technical experts. I always learn something new every single time I get to listen to them. Thank you, Aaron and NDIA and Katie and Tom and Sean from ILSR. Really great information. So over the course of this workshop, we have discussed our program in the context of this once-in-a-generation moment of investment. We've talked about how building the human infrastructure for our connected future will be critical to ensuring the pathway to opportunities we hope to see for our communities in the future. We've heard from one another, we've heard from partners, and of course, the federal co-chair, Gail Manchin, on how we're planning to support every community over the next several months and beyond. So at this point, thank you again. And thank you to ARC and our other funders for supporting this project. And most of all, thanks to you for being the champion of our Appalachian communities, leading the charge on envisioning the path forward for every resident living there. So while we're at the end of our workshop, we're only at the very beginning of our work together. I want to make sure that you connect with your lead community agencies. Everyone should have received an introduction email earlier this week. We want to make sure that you're able to review your community's broadband goals, anticipated challenges, and any recent updates to your community's broadband landscape that's going to be necessary to inform the planning process. Make sure you set up a regular meeting cadence going forward so that you're ensuring regular check-ins and strong communication so there's no delay in the support that we can provide to you. We're going to be sending you access to your personal Google Drives right after this call, along with a training calendar for the next month or so. So if you enjoyed some of the content that you were able to see today, more is coming. In fact, on November 7th, Tom is going to come back and talk to us about how to register for the Tier 4 Cost Quest fabric licenses. This is really critical for your broadband planning, and we want to make sure that you know how to do it. So we're going to talk about that. On November 14th, NDIA is going to come back and talk to us more in depth about asset mapping. This is going to be really critical early on to your planning processes, and we're going to have more. Right now, we have training planned for you almost every week through the end of the year. They're always going to be at 2 p.m. on Tuesdays, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So keep an eye out for more communications about what's coming up, and certainly plan to attend when possible. Again, thank you for your time today. I can't thank you enough for spending your entire afternoon with us and for working with us to plan the connected future of Appalachia. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thanks.